Landmarks Commission meeting of August 29th, 2012. First item on the agenda is public comment. And seeing no public speaker slips, I will close public comment and move on to approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of August 15th, 2012.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Boucher, second by Sharp. Under discussion, any additions, corrections, or clarifications? Commissioner Arias.
Just one point. I'd like to emphasize that it's very important that we have item number 2, the map showing the landmarks, structures and merits and things like that as soon. And I understand staff is beginning to work on it. So we really would like to, their staff, we really would like to have this come forward.
Wow, that was quick. Ask and you shall receive.
Well, it's not, Mr. Chair, in response to the Commission's request, we are in fact having a mapping project completed, and it does take a little bit of time because we're asking the staffing, the mapping staff person, technical person, to map them by parcel. And in years past, what we did was created dots, and we're creating layers for each type of designation. This happens to be the landmark designation layer. But I also would like to get a blow-up of this downtown core of the city so you actually see the structure and how that relates to what designation. Because when you pick a big parcel like this,
You don't know exactly.
It's, you know, it's there might be the individual buildings that might be more telling. So I basically want to tell you that it is in progress. We're not ignoring your request, and hopefully over time we'll get the parcels that are adjacent to these resources tagged in such a way that we will alert the Commission that there's an adjacent resource.
That's what our
And that's, I
intent
believe, your
is. Yeah,
desire.
your desire.
Yes.
Is this all the landmarks right there?
I've been told it is. We have not confirmed.
There's a house on Cornell, the Hunt Stambach house, is the landmark.
So that's why we don't want to present it. We want to double check it.
moved it.
Well, actually, you know, this was just printed up, and I just wanted to let you know that we are working on it,
Really glad
and
to see it
and we will
progressing.
coordinate our lists that are current with this map to make sure that they're all shown. But I do think that right now, when there's such small parcels, you really can't trigger in on where these are. If we blow it up, I think it'll be more helpful.
Commissioner Arias, the Cornell House is shown.
It is?
Yeah.
I've made, well, my eyesight's not that good then.
It
Yeah,
took me,
it's hard
it took me
to-
2 minutes to find it. So
So we'll see how the maps, whether they should be layered, because once we start putting the potential list off, it also gets very complicated. So we want to make sure we can present a map that's readable and understandable.
very helpful. Thank you for doing that. Anyone else? Any clarifications, corrections, or to the minutes? Okay. Commissioner Winnick.
Item number 10, final review, 33 West Victoria.
What page?
Page 10. Item 10, page 10. And it just said that the applicant agrees to a time-certain commitment of 3 months for the exterior painting. I just put in there that the applicant agrees to a time-certain commitment of a 3 months presentation for the exterior painting schemes. In other words, they weren't going to paint it in 3 months. They were going
You're
to
right.
present to us in
You're
3
right.
months. It seemed a little unfair.
So it should say the applicant agrees to a time-certain commitment of 3 months for the presentation for the exterior painting.
Exactly.
Does that work?
Yep, perfect. Yes.
So you can be more clear and say for the HLC presentation. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes. Mr. Lamone.
Yes, I wanted to clarify the item regarding the central library, which actually happens to be on today for designation. But when you made the motion to adopt the resolution of intention to hold a public hearing, I know there was some confusion about the public hearing or the public notice, whether we could amend it, because at that initial hearing, to adopt this resolution, you asked that all 13 eucalyptus trees be included in the designation request. And we had actually put the publication legal notice in for publication, and when there was concern that it was too late. But subsequent to the hearing, we discovered that, in fact, we could amend the legal notice. So I believe the intent of that motion was to indicate that the commission indicated that there would be support for a postponement of the public hearing if the legal notice could not be changed, rather than indicate that you would postpone the hearing to allow proper public notice. So I'd like to have that deleted from that motion and include that language.
Okay,
So we
Commissioner
could,
Lavoy and Commissioner Murray were the makers and the seconders. Do you agree with that? Okay.
So we can have the public hearing today as a result.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So the language is going to change, and does Ms. Feliciano have the change? Okay.
Just a minor point, and doesn't necessarily have to be corrected in the minutes, but the correct syntax for Eucalyptus corymbia situadora is corymbia, parenthesis, Eucalyptus situadora, since corymbia is now the current nomenclature. So, all in favor of the minutes as amended? Opposed?
I have to recuse myself on item
Abstain? Okay, 4. So Marie abstains on number 4, and Schallenberger abstains on the complete agenda, or rather the complete motion, or minutes. God. Okay, consent calendar, Ms. Gantz.
Mr. Chair, item A at 416 State Street was final approval with condition. Item B at 300 East Islay Street was final approval as noted. Item C at 121 State Street was final approval as noted. Item D, 118 East Carrillo Street was final approval as submitted, but that project was completely, project description was changed to only re-roof. So everything you see on the agenda, it's only the re-roofing that got approved and is occurring as that project for right now. And those were reviewed by Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Sharp, for reviewing the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to ratify? So moved. Second. A motion by Lavoy, a second by Arias. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions on the calendar? None. Go on to announcements, Ms. Gantz.
So Commissioner Drury will be absent today. And I just wanted to clarify the City Council hearing of the Historic Resources element document is tentatively scheduled on October 2nd. Commissioner Arias, is that correct? October 2nd, right? There was a mistake, I believe. It is October 2nd and not October 16th. And then item 10 on today's agenda at 1321, Alameda Padre Serra has been postponed 2 weeks at the applicant's request. The last item will move into that time slot, but it's the same architect. So, and that's all I have.
Okay, anybody else have any announcements? Commissioner Schallenberger.
First, I'll be leaving after item 2 today. Second, I spoke with the applicant for item 1 today, 1130 North Milpas. Since I was absent last week, I had some questions about the report and did have a brief question and answer session on the telephone today.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lavoy.
I have to step down on items 8 and 9.
Okay. Anyone else? 1. Okay, anybody else? All right. Subcommittee reports. Commissioner Schallenberger.
Just as a follow-up to that, I did review the video and will be voting today on item 1.
Okay.
Thanks.
Subcommittee, going once, going twice, gone. First item on the agenda is the Historic Structures Report for 1130 North Milpas Street. This is a review of a revised historic structures site addendum report prepared by Fermina Murray, architectural historian. The report concluded that the proposed alterations will be done in a non-adverse manner and that the physical characteristics will continue to convey its significance and eligibility for designation as a structure of merit. Please introduce yourselves for the record and make a brief presentation if you wish to.
Trish Allen with Susanna Hills Planning and Permitting.
Welcome.
Fermina Murray, preparer of the report.
Welcome. Anything you wish to say or add?
Staff.
Give you a chance first.
No.
You want staff?
Staff.
Okay, staff, go ahead.
I reviewed the revised report. I feel that it supports the conclusion. I support the conclusion that the project meets state CEQA guidelines of the MEA and relevant Secretary of Interior standards, and will result in it will not result in a significant adverse impact to the historic resources.
Okay. Mr. Limon, did you have something to add, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I don't know if you remember having this discussion before on historic structures reports, but I do want to remind the Commission that with respect to when you review a report and decide to accept the report and indicate whether you agree with the conclusions and findings, there is a basis for when you come to a conclusion that the report is lacking certain details, information, or basically has mistakes, for using that as a basis for not accepting the report. We've cautioned you to not delve into the issue of disagreeing with the conclusions of the report because, again, it puts the preparer of the report in a situation where you are essentially asking that report to be changed, and the report preparer has the ability to not change their opinion and conclusion of the report. It's just a common outcome that we expect a professional consultant to stick to their original conclusions. Now, the problem with this particular instance was not necessarily that you didn't have a valid reason for having some comments with respect to your conclusion that the compatibility question be addressed, and I believe this historian has embellished on the report to try to satisfy your concerns with respect to that analysis. But I want to caution you that the report is used for the purposes of CEQA, so there's a higher threshold with respect to impacts. So although this commission might conclude that they believe there may be some compatibility questions that should be addressed, you have to have a significant impact to say that the report is flawed and therefore that there is a CEQA impact. And so I would recommend in the future, if you have a specific concern, that you indicate on record what the concern would be, and you could, in fact, direct comments to the appropriate board, in this case, the Architecture Board of Review, if you have specific concerns about compatibility. You actually can direct them to look at specific issues, and that would be the appropriate means to forward those concerns.
So in other words, we can accept the report but not necessarily concur with the conclusions.
That's correct, and put that on record and explain to the
What the-
appropriate review board why
Understand.
Mr.
you're
Chair.
disagreeing with that conclusion.
Commissioner Schallenberger?
My recollection is that was the exact motion the first time that was withdrawn and changed, was to not accept the conclusions, but to accept the report.
There was a withdrawn motion, and the revised motion actually reads to not accept the report as the commission disagrees with the report's findings that the proposal consisting of a box office building and pedestrian entrance plaza is compatible with the Dreyer building.
Can you read the revised motion?
Well, that is the
I'm
revised.
sorry, not the revised, the
Oh, the
withdrawn.
original
The
motion was to accept the report that disagree with the report prepares conclusion that the proposal is compatible with the Dreyer building and they're having no significant impact.
So we would have been better not withdrawing that motion.
No. Actually, the revised motion is better.
Okay.
So you did something better, that you still raised the issue of compatibility with respect to it being a possible CEQA impact. If you just clarify that you want the report to expand further to make sure it's not a CEQA impact, and I think that's what the report prepared to address today.
Okay.
That if you still have compatibility questions, the appropriate venue would be to still indicate that and direct those comments to the ABR.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I can just start out before I turn it over to Ms. Murray, along with what staff was saying, that is exactly how we heard the commission's concerns 2 weeks ago in terms of a conclusion and interpreted that more information was needed. So that's exactly what we worked on with staff review and input to provide additional history on the history of the county bowl as it developed and provide some additional information on the Dreyer building and the surrounding buildings. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Murray. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission. I would like to just direct you to page 9, where this revised report basically addresses your motion. And the motion says, do not accept the report as Commission disagrees with the report's findings that the proposal consisting of the box office building and pedestrian entrance plaza is not compatible with the Dreyer building. So the analysis has really focused on that, the Dreyer building, and bringing more contextual background as to why the conclusion is still such that the new project will not have any adverse impact on the Dreyer building or the county bowl up above or the neighborhood and in the 1100 block of North Milpas. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
I have a question. So the revised statement and the analysis of impacts on the Dreyer building are gauged against CEQA levels,
Yes, they are.
not necessarily your professional opinion, although you do in your conclusion say
Yeah,
that you agree with those CEQA.
by analyzing the compatibility issue that the commission raised last time, and going through all of the standards, this is
Pardon?
argued on the perimeters of the standards, and then saying that the relevance of this building is really with the bowl and not with the Dreyer building, although it's still compatible in its building forms. And under CEQA, buffer zones and all that, it meets all of those requirements.
So everybody understands that, the difference there? Okay. Any questions from any other commissioners?
I have a question
Commissioner Reyes?
of Mr. Lamone. Excuse me. Can we address other issues in this other than just this building?
Commissioner Rios, you're concerned with things that are on this parcel or something that's occurring in another parcel?
I'm on this parcel.
On this parcel, if you have specific concerns, you could forward those concerns to the ABR. That's the appropriate purview authority on
Thank
this
you.
project.
Even though it doesn't involve the building.
If in fact there's a concern, we could note it and see if this commission agrees that it should be forwarded as a concern.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Lavoie?
I'd like to thank the applicant and the historian for preparing the report with the additional information. With these exhaustive evaluation of the impacts, I concur with the historian. I would like to see the report accepted by the commission, striking the second paragraph in quotes on page 9 so that it not enter into the record, to not accept, and ending with the Dreyer building.
So on page 9, you're proposing to
The
strike
second paragraph.
the second paragraph, which reads, "To not accept the report as the Commission disagrees with the report's findings and the proposal consisting of a box office building and pedestrian entrance plaza is not compatible with the Dreyer building."
Yes, so that there be no cloud on the report when it's read 10 years from now.
Yeah, and also you may have to, just the line above.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Okay.
A period after a motion.
I would agree.
Mr. Chair,
Hold on 1 second. Okay. Commissioner Reyes?
I'm not sure if this is the proper time or not, but in looking at the report, I find the pedestrian walkway is 18 feet in width. And there are several oak trees that are going to, well, there's one that's dead, but there's several that are going to be slated for removal. And if this is a pedestrian walkway, the pedestrians can walk around the oak trees. And the oaks are part of the ambience of the bowl and the country atmosphere, and I would like to see as many of the trees preserved as possible
Okay.
And I see that as one of the things that can be sent to the ABR
Right.
for their revision. And I would also like to
For
have
their
them...
review.
Yes, thank you. And I would also like to have them look very carefully at where the semi are parked in that parking lot and see if any of those trees could possibly be saved instead of just a bare parking lot of...
Okay.
So that would be what I would very much like to communicate to the ABR. Again, pedestrians can walk around the tree. We don't have to take out every single tree.
Okay.
And 18 feet is a pretty good walkway.
Commissioner LaVoy, I'm sorry, did you make a motion?
No, I was making comments,
Okay.
but I can make a motion. I will
Let me, no, before you do that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that you weren't in the middle of a motion. So staff will forward comments of Commissioner Arias, and I'm assuming the rest of the commission feels the same, to the Architectural Board of Review.
And I have something to add, too.
To summarize the comments is that the proposed 18-foot wide walkway, pedestrian walkway, seems excessive, particularly since it wipes out a significant number of oaks.
Mr. Chair, may I summarize?
Yeah, you summarize it. Go ahead.
The 18-foot walkway is adequate that pedestrians can walk around the few trees that are slated to be removed in that walkway, and that these trees are important for the ambience of the atmosphere of the county bowl. I don't think the walkway is excessive.
Okay,
It's
I
just a matter
misquoted you.
of walking around the trees. Sorry, Mr.
That's all
Chair.
right. No, I misquoted you.
And also, I would like them to look very carefully at the parking lot where the semis are to see if any of those trees could be possibly saved.
You feel comfortable with that? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm looking for someone to make a motion
Can I
for...
add something, too, Mr. Chair?
Oh, yeah, Commissioner Winnick, sorry.
And thank you, Mr. Lamone, for the clarification at the beginning, because I think it helped me out, and thank you for coming back with the revised detail in the report. So I think for me, I had a problem with the conclusion of compatibility before, because I have issues about the architecture that I'd just like to share with ABR to add. Not a lot, just basically this one elevation, a 3.1 elevation page. And it's the long elevation of the proposed box office. You'll see it at the bottom left-hand corner. And
This one here?
that elevation. My concern is that the building is broken up into multiple pieces, particularly with the stone underneath the windowsills, between the plaster component of that long facade, exactly our chairperson is indicating. I think that's not compatible with the other architecture of the bowl that's shown in the photographs that were attached to the new revised report, as well as to the dryer building. So that's something I would like to point out to ABR that they take a look at and reconsider putting that sort of
Can
stone
you sum
decoration.
that up in a few sentences for Ms. Feliciano to
Sure.
record?
I would like to have ABR take a look at elevation A3.1. That's the north elevation of the box office building for compatibility.
South elevation.
Oh, south elevation? Sorry. That's correct. It is facing north, right. South elevation for the compatibility with the dryer building as well as the balance of the bowl architecture for a more unified looking facade. Should I mention the stone under the window? Can we give?
You can
can
say
we back-
particularly the stone.
Particularly the stone elements that are underneath the four vertical windows. I'm sorry, five vertical windows.
You comfortable with that, Ms. Feliciano? Okay. Now, the motion really has nothing to do with those comments to the ABR, so we're just accepting the report or not.
Okay.
Mr. LaVoy.
Motion to accept the report, striking on page 9 the first two paragraphs.
Okay? And that's a motion for what?
Final approval.
Okay? Okay, we have a motion by LaVoy, second by Schallenberger.
Wait, Mr. Lamont has something.
I just would like to always have you accept the report rather than approve it, just as a
Okay.
form of
Accept the
procedure.
report.
Accept the report.
We have a motion to accept the report. We have a second by Schallenberger. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Oh, phew. Smooth sailing.
Now, should I tell him?
Okay, thank you, and I apologize. There you go.
I like mine.
All right, next item on
Okay,
the
I want mine.
agenda is item number 2. Item number 2 is 34 East Mission Street, and this is a review of a historic structures site report prepared by Host Hazeltine Associates. The report found the subject parcel eligible for designation as a City of Santa Barbara Structure of Merit and for listing in the California Register of Historical Resources. Staff, Ms. Hernandez.
I agree with I support the report's conclusions that the project meets state CEQA guidelines of the MEA and Secretary of Interior standards and will not result in a significant adverse impact to the historic resource.
This is quite
Okay.
annoying.
Do you have anything you want to add or present to us? Jordan?
Really briefly, Jarrett Gorin, Vanguard Planning, and I'm the agent, and I represent Catherine Compere, the property owner. I think it would just benefit your board to understand a quick backstory on this. The client acquired this property in May of this year. There were a number of zoning violations cited on the property prior to us acquiring it. There had been some alterations done to this house which were not consistent with the craftsman style of the house. And those include some windows that were installed on some sleeping porches and changing out some porch columns and things. So the new client wants to restore the house to full craftsman details, and that's really the extent of our work. And we don't even have an application in for any of the work yet. We just wanted to bring this report through first since we're going to need it for everything we plan on doing.
Okay, I appreciate that. Questions from commissioners? Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Murray.
I wanted to ask about the gates, the proposed gates, because I just went by the property this morning, and it seems like there's a retaining wall, and I'm a little concerned about how these gates, 11 feet high gates, wooden gates.
Is there a photo of that, perhaps?
I'm trying to figure it out.
If there's going to be a gate to the garage and then a gate in front.
We'll wait a second to see the photo, see if we have a photo. Oh, would that be here, figure 22 down at the bottom?
The gates to the garage?
Yeah. Well, the plan says there's going to be gates. Proposed gates are going to be 11 feet high, and in this, I think in the site plan.
Is it this plan here?
Yeah.
Page 1?
Yeah. There's some.
Right here, it
Yeah.
says new 11-foot gate with
Yeah.
electric opener.
Yeah.
No, it's pointing to here.
We're pointing to there. And
So
then
that
there's
would be
another
this
one.
location
Yeah, this
here.
location. And then there's another one somewhere in here. That's-
New
You mean in the
6-foot
front?
gate.
Yeah.
In the
And I don't, yeah, and I don't know how will that sit with the sandstone retaining wall. I mean,
I don't think there is
There
a
isn't
sandstone.
a sandstone retaining wall.
in that.
Here?
Oh.
No.
No,
Neither is there
there's
here.
just, there's
Okay.
just hedges.
Yeah, all right.
Fermina?
Yeah.
I had asked them to do an elevation with the gates in
Yeah.
front of the house,
Yeah,
but
that's-
I haven't quite got that yet, but I would ask for it to be in any
Okay,
final
good.
drawings
Yeah, I
to make
have that-
sure that meets with the Secretary of Interior standards,
That-
because I
thank you.
questioned that as well.
Yeah, thank you. That was my
Okay.
only concern.
Any other questions from commissioners? How about comments? Commissioner Schallenberger? Commissioner Rios?
I have to say I'm impressed with somebody making the effort to bring something back, and I think the work it's well done.
Great. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Commissioner Lavoie?
I agree with Commissioner Reyes.
Commissioner Murray, any comments?
I was concerned about the height of the garage, and I guess it's
Of the garage gate?
not the garage gate, but
The garage itself,
garage
okay.
building. Is that going to be, I mean, it's 20 feet high, and I didn't really know what the height of the building is, the existing building. I would like to see how that the siding of that garage is going to impact the house from the front.
Yeah, there are on sheet 9, there are elevations.
Hold on 1 minute. Let me get to that.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I'm Tim Hazeltine with Post Hazeltine Associates. And on sheet 9 in Appendix A, there are depictions of the pedestrian gate, which is the lower one on the drawing. And then up above it is the vehicular gate that would open onto Anacapa Street.
Okay, so it's not 11 feet tall, it's 11 feet wide.
I think it's
okay.
11 feet wide.
Yeah.
So
That's what I was
that,
going to get to.
I think that's, I think what Nicole was saying,
Okay.
that they need to be with the elevations of the buildings.
Well,
I think,
what we did is we had gotten direction from staff to include the additional drawing, which we did.
Okay, we're in
here.
comments, so that's
Yeah.
a
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry.
You've got it.
I'm sorry.
You've got it, and we're done.
But the height of the building,
We have the elevation of the garage as well.
Okay, what page?
I don't have the page memorized in the plan set.
Why not?
But I'm sure it's there.
Is it this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't have an elevation that shows both structures together, but this is shorter than the principal residence by significantly. I'm not sure what the
Okay. That's enough.
Okay.
What is your comment?
that was my question.
No.
Comment question.
Is what?
The concern that the visibility of this new garage from the front.
Okay. So there's a concern about the visibility of the garage height from Anacapa Street, right?
Anacapa Street?
No, sorry, Mission Street.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments about the report? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to accept the report?
Chair, make a motion to accept the report.
I have a motion by Lavoy, a second by, I'm waiting for staff to catch up. Okay. Motion by Boucher. All in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Great. Thank you. Here's the copy, if you want.
No.
Okay, Commissioner Schallenberger is leaving. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for 40 East Anapamu Street. This is review of the staff report and public hearing to consider adoption of a resolution to recommend to City Council that the Central Library, the Faulkner Gallery, and the Corymbia Citriodora trees be designated as a city landmark. Previously, Corymbia Citriodora was Eucalyptus citriodora. Ms. Hernandez?
Okay, we have a small presentation with an overview of the history and qualifying criteria for the Central Library, Faulkner Gallery, and I will call them the Corymbia trees instead of the all three names.
Don't even go there, just Corymbia.
Corymbia is what they're going to be referred to for the presentation. This is a photograph of the building right after it was completed. It was begun in 1916. This is when it was completed in 1917. The library was funded by the Carnegie Foundation, which was designed by the nationally recognized Harry Hornbostel of Pittsburgh in the Spanish colonial revival style. The drawings were simplified by the local architect Francis Wilson, and the ornate sculpture around the front entrance was designed by architect Carlton Winslow. This is an aerial view of the library right after it was built in 1917, and you'll see this. The Faulkner Gallery is not there at this time yet. This is the Faulkner Gallery right after it was built in 1931. Soon after the earthquake had damaged the Central Library, funds and the land for the Faulkner Gallery were donated to the library to build an art gallery to house the library's art and art-related material.
Can you hold on that picture for a minute, please?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm sorry, never mind.
The nationally recognized architect Myron Hunt of Hunt and Chambers Architects designed the gallery. It was done in the Art Deco style with tiered pools in the plaza that you see here. Although Hunt and Chambers landscape plan did not specify the Corymbia trees, Soon after the completion of the Faulkner Gallery, they were planted as they are estimated to be approximately 80 years old.
Okay, it's Carimbia.
Carimbia. I'm going to become a landscape savvy soon.
Just have to study Latin, that's all.
The included in this designation, the library has been listed on the potential list since 1978. The Central Library and Faulkner buildings qualify for historic landmark designation under the Santa Barbara Municipal Code 2222.040, criteria A, D, E, F, and G, and I, and the Carimbia trees qualify under criterion I. The library plaza is excluded because in the renovations in the late 70s, early 80s, the tiered pools and alterations made it so that it no longer conveys any historic significance. The trees, there are 3 of the Carimbia trees on the west elevation in front of the entrance here. There are also 8 trees on the rear elevation and 2 trees on the Anacapa elevation. Nationally recognized Ralph Talent Stevens was credited with the landscape design of the library. However, there are no plans that I have been able to find that show a date, so that we don't know which elements he designed or contributed to the design and which still exists today. However, because the large trees now tower over the Central Library, they've become significant skyline elements to the El Pueblo Viejo district and downtown. Under criterion A, the character, interest, and value of this as a significant part of the heritage of the city, the library qualifies because as a Carnegie Library, the Central Library represents the impact of the Carnegie Library Grant Program, providing access to knowledge for people of all incomes across the nation. It's a significant part of the heritage of Santa Barbara, California, and the nation. Criterion D, its exemplification of a particular architectural style or way of life important to the city, state, or the nation. The Central Library building embodies distinguishing characteristics of the Spanish colonial revival style with classical Renaissance details that are important to the city's character. The 1930 Faulkner Gallery exemplifies the once nationally popular Art Deco style characterized by its smooth stucco wall surfaces, linear symmetry, and stylized entrance. Criterion E, its exemplification of the best remaining architectural type in a neighborhood. The Faulkner Gallery in particular is one of the best remaining examples of Art Deco in Santa Barbara. Criterion F, its identification as the creation, design, or work of persons or persons whose efforts significantly influence the heritage of the city, state, or nation. Distinguished architects Harry Hornbostel, Francis Wilson, Carlton Monroe Wilson, and Myron Hunt contributed to the design and the creation of the Central Library as well as the Faulkner Gallery. Their noted design efforts significantly influenced the heritage of the city, state, or nation. Criterion G, embodiment of elements demonstrating outstanding attention to architectural design, details, materials, and craftsmanship. The Central Library has skillfully carved wood brackets under the eaves, carved wood windows, and intricately carved wood sculpture over the main entrance door. It demonstrates outstanding attention to detail and craftsmanship. The Faulkner Gallery's linear Art Deco entrance with its stylized sunburst demonstrates outstanding attention to architectural design. And criterion I, the unique location or singular physical characteristic representing established and familiar feature of a neighborhood. The complex sits in a central location in the downtown neighborhood and El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. It has dominated the highly visible corner of Anapamu and Anacapa Streets since 1917. It is an established and familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. The approximately 80-year-old coriamba trees tower over the Central Library and are an established and familiar feature of the neighborhood and El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District. The library and the Faulkner Gallery qualify for all 7 aspects of integrity in location, design, and setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, so that they communicate this original significance of the building. And staff does recommend that the HDLC adopt a resolution to recommend to City Council that the Central Library, Faulkner Gallery, and coriamba trees be designated as city landmarks.
That concludes your presentation?
That concludes my presentation.
Mr. Limon, anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair. As you're aware, there were some correspondence letters received. Specifically, There were 2 memorandums prepared by our Parks and Recreation Director, Ms. Nancy Rapp, and our Library Director, Irene Macias. They're both in attendance today. If you have any questions with respect to their letters, they are on record that they are recommending against the historic designation for various reasons. And Ms. Rapp's memorandum actually outlines some specific municipal code authority purviews that I would like to expand a little bit on after you take public testimony, if you may permit me to do that.
Actually, I would like you to do that before
Okay.
public testimony.
Okay. Let me explain some of the provisions that were outlined in Ms. Rapp's memorandum. I've handed out a excerpt of our code sections that are applicable. And what, in fact, is happening here, I don't know if you remember about 6 months ago we came here and gave you some discussion about purview authority and how we asked boards and commissions to participate in review of projects. And what we have here is really a different purview authority with respect to historic and specimen trees. The municipal code actually outlines exceptions that are provided for in, and I want to have you refer to the handout, in 1520, actually starts in 2222. There's an exception on page 1 there of your handout that says significant pruning or removal of a historic tree. A significant pruning or removal of historic tree is processed and regulated in accordance with Chapter 1524 of this code. And what it basically says is that the Parks and Recreation Commission has authority once a tree is designated a landmark or historic tree. And your involvement in that decision would be limited only if it were to be part of an application request. In other words, if a project like the library remodel project that came in had come in and it was part of a project, you would have an ability to weigh in on whether the trees should be removed or not. But what it does outline is if the tree removal in fact comes forward separately, that authority is primarily given to the Parks and Recreation Director or the Parks and Recreation Commission for that removal. And there are some circumstances here where the director has some broad authority if there's a hazardous condition, basically a hazard that would need to be corrected for a public tree and anything on public land. And that's the distinction here. It is a tree on public land, a city park, a library parcel. So I wanted to point that out to you. That you do have dual purview sometimes. In this case, once it gets designated a landmark tree, that will, in fact, basically push it up to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Now, one consideration on whether the tree would be removed, and those are the findings that are considered, is whether it's a historic or landmark tree. So essentially, you are elevating the importance of the tree and noting to the Parks and Recreation Commission that you think it's of value for the community.
So it gives it an extra level of
To
protection.
some degree, yes. The council obviously will make a final decision on your recommendations. They will consider all the input, including the Parks Recreation Director's opinion, as well as the Library Director's. For that reason, I'm going to recommend that when we go to City Council, we actually present 2 council resolutions, one dealing with the trees and discussing how many trees, if any trees, should be designated, and the structure itself, because I think there's less controversy associated with the structure. And I don't want the whole designation to fall apart because...
Okay.
Yeah.
In the past, we have separated it out. Specifically with the Granada building, we had sort of separated it out. But if you want to do 2 resolutions, I don't think that's a
Well,
problem.
we're going to do that. You can still adopt today's resolution if you feel comfortable. But obviously, you're going to hear public comment, and you can decide anything based on what you feel is appropriate to forward to council.
Okay. Okay. I want
I have one correction in the report.
Corinthia.
Yeah, I will correct that. But I was under the impression that all 5 of the trees were threatened in the original landscape design, but I was corrected in that just the 3 at the entrance were threatened. The other 2 were not.
Okay. I want to let people know that are here for the next item, item number 4. It's just scheduled at 2:20. We will most likely not get to that until 2:35. We have 8 public speaker slips, allowing a minimum of 2 minutes for each. Puts us well into the 2:30 range. So I open public comment. First person to speak is Mary Louise Days, followed by Eric Friedlander. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mary Louise Days, I'd like to support the recommended designation. It's wonderful to see a full historical report submitted again. This is a very significant building to all of us Santa Barbarans, and the people associated with are certainly noteworthy in our history. Thank you.
Okay. Eric, followed by Fred Sweeney. Can you spell your last name for me?
Sure, Friedman, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-N.
No, how come I didn't get that?
I should have been a doctor. My handwriting's so bad.
Okay.
Chair Suding and Commission, thank you for this time to speak. I'm actually here today in regards to the 3 eucalyptus trees and request that you actually take no action on those. I don't have an opinion either way at this point on whether or not they should be landmarked, but what I do have concerns with is, as someone who was involved with the stakeholder process for the plaza renovation, there was a lot of community meetings on that. The preferred alternative, which you saw actually was for basically leveling it out, ADA compliant. It's in your staff report. And I just feel that by landmarking them today, that kind of takes away that public process, because even though that project is not, has been currently on hold due to the lack of funding, it is likely that it will come back in the future, whether through private funding or a combination of public-private. And that would be the appropriate time to have for your commission to weigh in, because it would come back before your commission. And also, it would put it in context of what the greater vision for the library is, because there is significant debate on how that entrance will play into the children's library that's coming in there and everything else that the visioning process that's going on for the library. And by landmarking those trees, it severely limits what can be done with the plaza, and especially due to ADA compliance and others. So I would ask that on those 3 in particular trees that you take no action today. It still gives you the ability to look at those if and when a project should come back in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Mr. Sweeney, followed by Alexandra Cole.
Mr. Chair and Board, thank you. I come today before you not as an architect, but as an artist. And
Wait,
I'm really
just a
focusing on focusing on the 3 eucalyptus trees. One might think of these trees, I certainly could see one being painted by Edward Hopper or George O'Keeffe. They're magnificent specimens. Having grown up near Nipomo, California, where eucalyptus trees are part of our historical heritage, when one looks at early photographs of Santa Barbara, we see a lot of cases where eucalyptus trees are part of the historic venue of the vegetation that was here. I think this is a case where we have some exquisite trees that are also part of our heritage, part of our city's history. And just like the pepper tree that's in front of the City Hall, and again, pepper tree is not native to California, neither is the eucalyptus, but it's the adaptation of the history of who we are as Californians that I think is very, very important. So as an artist, as a scene painter, I think preserving these trees is terribly important. Switching back to an architect, I think a good design team will be able to come up with a solution that can embrace the placement of those trees and still meet the vision of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Cole, followed by Bob Cunningham.
Thank you, Alexandra Cole, members of the board, chairman. I am here in support of the landmark nomination, and particularly the inclusion of the corymbia trees. They are part, thank you, Louise. They're definitely, I'm always involved with the historic buildings, but in Santa Barbara, we are also so involved with the historic context, which has to do with landscape as well. And the landscaping is all part of the historic context of the Faulkner Gallery and the Faulkner Library. And it is, just as Mr. Sweeney said, it is part of our history of these are the kinds of trees that were adopted by the architects and the landscape architect to complement the building. So I'm here to support not only the library, but also the corymbia trees.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Cole. Mr. Cunningham, followed by W. Scott Burns.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I helped to put together the package recommending designation of the Corumbias and did some research. Granted, we could not find a landscape plan by Ralph Stevens. However, I think there was enough evidence to show that Ralph Stevens did do the landscape design for the library grounds. One of the exhibits that I submitted that I don't think is in your package is a rendering by Hunt and Chambers that shows the trees behind the building, behind the Faulkner Gallery, and also to the left of the Faulkner Gallery against the existing library at the time, that clearly to me indicate the architect's intentions to have those skyline trees included in the design. The fact that with regard to the perhaps convoluted and overlapping jurisdictions, I think it cannot hurt to have a redundant designation of these trees as historic landmarks. They are quite old. I think it's clear enough to me, at least, that they are the result of a noted landscape designer's plans and the intent of the architects involved, and I think they should be given historic landmarks status. I have read the minutes of the Park and Recreation Commission's deliberations when the Library Plaza project was presented conceptually. It doesn't give me a high degree of confidence that were this project to be revived, there would be a very strong stance to protect these trees. And granted that the Parks and Recreation Commission has authority over other trees in town, we have a very old eucalyptus, or Corymbia citriodora, in the 400 block of Santa Barbara Street that I think is our most recent tree historic landmark designation. I don't see a big difference between the two, except this is on city property. And as much as I admire city staff and our various commissions and various departments, I think there's a very strong chance that if one department really wanted something badly, another department would find that it's okay to allow that regardless of the impact on the city's historic landscape. That's it. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. I appreciate all your time and effort in putting together, or helping put together this report. W. Scott Burns, followed by Irene Macias.
Hi, I'm Scott Burns, W. Scott Burns. Thanks for letting me speak. I was on the Park and Rec Commission. Most of you may know I left for health reasons. I'm on the National Kidney Transplant list for a new kidney.
Good luck.
Well, that is always good. The meeting on November 16th, I was just out of the hospital and I wasn't able to attend. I gave minutes the following day. Let me read one short sentence. The 3 lemon-scented eucalyptus trees unfortunately need to be removed. With the existing landscaping across from Anapamu, one does not realize there are 4 arches between the library and the Faulkner Gallery. I was on the Park and Rec Commission, and there's some more comments I'd like to make. On page 6 of the staff report, you're talking about the trees, and a couple of things you're mentioning are that they're fragrant, they're drought tolerant, etc. I Googled the trees, and I have got 2 reports from Australia, and I'll hand Mr. Downing the fact sheets. One was a street tree fact sheet, which stated limb shear. Many reports of the shedding of major limbs, often into the response of hot weather, high wind velocities, and particularly if large roots have been severed in urban landscape plantings. Another report, sudden limb shear in trees. What species are most vulnerable? Lemon-scented gum are the trees to be watched in particulars. As trees age, the likelihood of limb shear increases. These eucalyptus trees are known to continually drop litter and shed branches. Trees of this species are no longer planted adjacent to buildings or in public walkways because of potential hazards for public safety. The city arborist says the trees are expected to live a long time, and they probably will. In their healthy state, though, they shed a
You got 15
large
seconds, please.
quantity of debris. So to finish up, I agree that the library and Faulkner Gallery should be designated historic buildings. The staff report has 7 criteria why they should be reported. Skyline trees only meet criteria I. Have you considered what's happening? And I think you're beginning to see what will happen if you realize that any skyline tree could be historic. And my final point is, if there had been any knowledge of the future entrance being at the present location between the two buildings, I don't think that the Winslow, the library architect, or Hunt, the architect of the Faulkner, would have installed trees to block the entry. So I recommend against the historic designation of the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Irene Macias, followed by Susan Chamberlain.
Good afternoon, Chair Suding and members of the Commission.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you. I know you do have my memo in hand, and I just wanted to make a few brief remarks. And I am recommending against the designation of the trees, although I am very proud of the buildings, both the Central Library and Faulkner, and do recommend designation for the 2 buildings. And my concern is that, even though we aren't moving forward and have put the plan on hold for redesign, we don't want to preclude any opportunities in the future. And my concern is that they may impact our ability to achieve a design that really helps us to move our mission forward. And just a reminder that the 2 of the major goals were to create a large, flexible space that we could have activities not only for the library but for the community, and then also to try to create better access and view of the entrance to the library. And while no one can argue the beauty of the trees, and I myself have photographed them numerous times, I do want to point out that when the buildings were built, it was never contemplated that that would become an entrance. And so now those trees stand in front of the access to, and do block, as has been mentioned, do block the view of the entrance. And I think and that space is very unattractive. And I just want to point out the contrast to the prior entrance, which is a magnificent and beautiful entrance. And then the entrance to the Faulkner Gallery also is quite stunning. And so it bothers me that the current entrance into this wonderful facility that provides so many services to the community is in such a state of disrepair. So we really want to have the ability to do something to make that area look nicer. And we did come before the Commission, and we were asked to continue to study the retention of the eucalyptus trees. And that really was our plan, to move forward and to work with the architect to find a way to achieve that goal of making the entrance more appealing and visible, and to consider the value of the trees. So I also just wanted to commend Nicole for her wonderful report. It was very nice to read about the history of the library and to see it promulgated to more people. So thank you.
All publicity is good publicity. All right. Ms. Chamberlain, and I will then close public comment.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Chamberlain. I'm a landscape historian.
Welcome.
And thank you. I'm in the bibliography as the author on the piece on Ralph Stevens. I wanted to thank Bob Cunningham for his really excellent research. I support having the trees made into landmarks. And I'd also like staff to include a short bio of Ralph Stevens because it was a licensed landscape architect, and the architects are all listed. And you can find the information online, Casa del Herrero nomination form. I wrote about him, and there's a short bio there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chamberlain. Closing public comment and bringing it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Rios, any questions? Commissioner Lavoie. Commissioner Murray? Okay. Commissioner Sharp?
None.
Boucher? Winnick?
Nope.
Comments? Staff, anything to add? Anybody?
Mr. Chair?
We're awfully quiet. Okay. You have comments?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Lavoie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the designation of both the buildings and the trees. The problem with the trees seems to stem from a flawed design that resulted in the abandonment of the two primary entrances to this building, two primary and historic entrances to this building, which are left as remnants and unusable. It would be better to me, rather than removing the trees, but to reestablish the entrances where they belong. Also, that any future plans for the plaza be inspired by the picture provided of the original fountain
Would
and
that be
plaza
that one?
scheme. That one. That one.
Gee, how did I guess?
Thank you.
Okay. And just maybe let me make a comment that before anybody makes a motion, I have wording for a motion that we need to sort of follow. So,
Yeah.
Commissioner Murray.
I have comments. I also support the designation, and especially the designation of the trees. As I read the letter from Nancy Rapp, I just think that having that resolution, having the park recreations directive, plus designating these trees is like providing a double insurance. You have two insurances now that will put these trees to become historic. Therefore, that provision for the park department will be even stronger in trying to protect the trees or care for them. So I fully support that. Also, we found out that this is a Carnegie Mellon library.
Yeah.
And to distinguish this library from other Carnegie Mellon libraries, these trees are the distinguishing factor. And so it's really important to have that sense that this is part of the designation. I also agreed with the testimony from Bob Cunningham that if we don't designate these trees, there's always going to be this cloud of where does the power lies in protecting the trees. So I think it's just very important part of the designation that these trees be included in it, and I would fully support that.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms. Murray. Any other comments?
I would like to say that I agree with Commissioner Lavoie and Murray and everything that was said.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say the same thing as
Okay.
very good comments.
I'd like
Commissioner
to
Winnick?
concur, and I also want to thank the public because I think the comments were very constructive and very clean.
Yes.
I appreciated that process. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Rios, did you have any comments? No. Okay, I'll look for somebody to make a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt Resolution 2012-01 and forward the landmark designation request of the Central Library, Faulkner Gallery, and all 13 eucalyptus Corymbia citriodora trees located at 40 East Anapamu Street to the City Council for consideration, with the recommendation that the Council also place the trees in the City Parks Department landmark, historic, and specimen trees list.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Lavoie, a second by Arias. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. I want to thank the public as well for coming out in force. We appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, 2300 Garden Street. This is review of a staff report and public hearing to consider adoption of a resolution to recommend to City Council that the St. Anthony Seminary Complex and grounds be designated as a city landmark. Ms. Hernandez.
I have a similar presentation that outlines the significance of St. Anthony's Complex and grounds. And this report was a little longer than probably typical, but there were 7 buildings to analyze. So that, here we go. This is a map of the parcel. We are proposing the complex and grounds, including the whole parcel, because of the significant historic walls surrounding the parcel and landscape features. The entrance to the property is here where the gates are, and you come up to the large lawn. This is the main building, and then the west wing, service wing, chapel, muir building, rectory, and shop. And this is where all the buildings sort of intertwine and make courtyards and cloisters. I'm going to run through just each building and the landscape so you can see a little bit of it. Let's see. This is the front gate and entrance on the major landscape features that were highlighted by the historian who did the historic structures report were these exterior sandstone walls, the original entrance pillars. There's also a sandstone wall in front of the main building and refectory. The open lawn in front of the main building has remained constant since its construction, and the palm trees in front of the main building. The St. Anthony Seminary began in 1896 when the Franciscan order that ran the Santa Barbara Mission established the seminary. Attendance increased so quickly that the site for a large building was chosen just west of the mission, on a hill with a view of the ocean. The school rapidly expanded and built all the wings and additions that resulted in the complex. It was framed by the low sandstone walls. This is the main building that was built in 1901, and it was drastically altered in 1926 after the earthquake. It was built in 1901 as a Romanesque building, and then altered with the more Spanish colonial revival by architect Ross Montgomery in 1926 over the bottom floors that remain Romanesque. Let's see. Okay, this is the first wing, was the west wing, built in 1923. This was also designed by architect Ross Montgomery in the Spanish colonial revival with classical elements. This was right here is the service wing that was designed also by Ross Montgomery in the Spanish colonial revival style in 1923. This is the chapel. Thanks. Designed in 1926. It was also designed by Ross Montgomery, but he did this one in a Romanesque style with the bell tower, which is more of a Renaissance, Italian Renaissance style. This little shop building is just off the cloister, but contributes to the significance as a whole. It was built in 1938 with the Spanish colonial revival elements. This is the 1939 Muir building, also Spanish colonial revival. This was designed by John Donovan in 1939. 1949, the refectory building was added in the Spanish colonial revival with classical elements, as you can see in this little classical pediment around the front entrance. This is the original main building when it was built in the full Romanesque style before the damage was done during the earthquake and rebuild of the top floors. The complex and grounds do qualify for city landmark status as per the Santa Barbara Municipal Code 22-22040. Criterion A, its character, interest, and value as a significant part of the heritage of the city, state, or nation. The complex is noted for its association with the Franciscan presence in Santa Barbara, which began with the establishment of the Collegio Franciscano in 1868 at the Mission. The present complex was the home of St. Anthony Seminary from 1899 to 1987 and continues in the educational use today as a home for San Roque School. Criterion C, its identification with person or persons who significantly contributed to the culture and development of the city, state, or nation. The complex is identified with the Franciscan order, who not only significantly contributed to the culture and development of Santa Barbara, but who worked to build and staff the school. The complex is also qualifies under Criterion D, exemplification of a particular architectural style, way of life important to the city, state, or nation. The complex is significant for its unusual mix of architectural styles, which are associated with Santa Barbara, including the Romanesque, Spanish Renaissance, and Spanish Colonial Revival styles. Criterion E, its exemplification as the best remaining architectural type in a neighborhood. And this is an aerial photo taken after the chapel and bell tower were constructed. The complex is the best remaining type in the neighborhood and the city of a complex of this type. Criterion F, its identification as the creation, design, or work of person or persons whose effort significantly influenced the heritage of the city, state, or the nation. The primary significant architectural elements of the complex are the work of architects Brother Adrian Hewer, Ross Montgomery, and the sculptor Christian Mueller. Their noted design efforts to significantly influence the heritage of the city. Montgomery is noted for his ecclesiastical architecture statewide, and Hewer is considered notable in the state and nation for his body of work with the Franciscan order throughout California and the Midwest. And the sculptor Mueller, who sculpted part of the Reredos in the chapel, is noted for his sculpture on both state and national levels. Criterion H, the relationship to any other landmark if its preservation is essential to the integrity of that landmark. This is part of El Pueblo Viejo Landmark District Part 2, and it is adjacent to the National Historic Landmark and City Landmark Santa Barbara Mission. And to the east is the city landmark, the Hoffman House, to the west. The history of the three properties is intertwined, and the preservation of the complex is essential in preserving the character of El Pueblo Viejo District Part 2. The complex sits on a commanding site overlooking Garden Street, and its 7-story bell tower and 4-story central building are singular physical characteristics which make it a familiar visual feature of the neighborhood. And it has been visible to the public in one architectural form or another since 1899, so it qualifies for Criteria I, its unique location and singular physical characteristic representing an established and familiar feature of a neighborhood. It also qualifies for all 7 aspects of integrity: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, and feeling and association. All are still in a good enough condition that it can communicate its potential significance. And staff does recommend that the HLC adopt a resolution to recommend to City Council that St. Anthony's complex and grounds be designated as a city landmark.
Any trees?
It includes the whole grounds. So the significant landmark feature, we noted significant landmark features, the palm trees, but I took those from the historian's analysis in her HSR, but I think there might be some more features that could be noted in.
Does that conclude staff's presentation?
Yes.
Okay. We'll now open public comment. I have 4 speaker slips. First being Mary Louise Days, followed by Fred Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Louise Days, local historian, and I've been involved with the historical research on this property for over 30 years, going back to the Friends Daughters High School project that really got interested then. I was under the impression, perhaps I misheard, that the Planning Commission, in giving some approvals to all the redo of the property, conditioned a designation on their approval. It's not mentioned in the report. Also, it's been on the City of Santa Barbara potential list derived from the Phase 2 architectural survey since 1980-81. The report says 1986. I really think it's a thorough, interesting report, which certainly shows how important this site is. I support the entire designation. I would like to point out, too, that there are very likely mission period remains under the surface, and perhaps even partly on the surface, connected to the mission itself, such as the granary, the threshing floor, parts of the weavery, which really would add to support of the recommendation from you that the grounds be included. Also, the Bernard Hoffman house residence, not the guest house, but the house to the west, which is also a landmark, is also significant and connected with this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Question for staff: was a previous project, or did Planning Commission condition the previous approval?
No, that is not. Previous remodels have not required a planning commission review, so therefore there hasn't been a condition that we're aware of. We do have that at the El Encanto property, which is also coming forward.
Mr. Sweeney, followed by Mary Rose.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Board. And, well, I can wear all of those, but I come before you as a member of the Upper East Association, and I believe you all have received a letter from our association with regards to this issue, and I won't bother to read that. But essentially, I wanted to bring a couple of points to you. One is that you may remember or recall that we appeared in front of this board at the last time this project was before you, and at that time we requested the applicant to make some effort to communicate with the Upper East Association, or certainly the immediate neighbors. The owner of the Hoffman Estate is present here today at this meeting. Just conferred with him. There's been no effort at all, as far as we know, for the applicant to contact us, communicate, et cetera. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. But then more importantly, I think the term cultural asset is very, very important. That was mentioned at the previous meeting. It's not just the architecture, although I love remembering the fact when they used to have a green light in the tower at Christmas, because I can see that from my bedroom window. But also the grounds, and I think the issue of the trees, the foliage, it really is integral to who we are as the Upper East neighborhood. But in addition to that, not only is the Upper East neighborhood, it's part of the historical backdrop to the mission, to the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, to the whole complex of who we are as Santa Barbarans. And given the history of St. Anthony's, both good and bad, it's an integral part of our history. The grounds themselves are an integral part of who we are, its relationship to the mission, and certainly as you begin to review whatever progress is made, consideration for how it relates to that edge condition. And I really talk about the edge condition being that area between the St. Anthony grounds and the mission, St. Anthony grounds and Garden Street. The edge condition is a vital ingredient of how this facility will continue to contribute to the Upper East Side. So please consider that as you move forward in this deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sweeney. Mary Rose, followed by, excuse me, Michael Corrigan.
Thank you. I am here today actually to request, I know you're having the hearing, but if you could put off your decision for 2 weeks would be great. The owner, the trustee of the trust, has been out of the country since April, about the last time we were here. We have had some communication. She's obviously aware that you're very interested in the landmarking. It's been discussed over time, and she has indicated in correspondence with the city that she's willing to consider landmarking the significant buildings. We have not been able to have a conversation about this specific of the entire grounds. I'm not saying she's opposed. I'm not saying she's in favor. I'm saying we have not been able to communicate. We've tried transatlantic phone calls. They're on a cruise, and they will be back in the country this week, and just the timing just hit, and we did try to talk to staff about maybe putting this over, but with the notice, I know you have the public here as well. So that's really the request. We've tried to work very hard with you, and we over the years, you've been very cooperative with all of the changes and things. So that's just the one last request, is that we could put it off, any decision-making for 2 weeks.
Mr. Lamont, can we postpone adoption of this resolution for 2 weeks, or is that put us too close to the...
No, after you hear this, the entirety of the public hearing, you have the ability to continue this item and have it heard again at your next hearing, as long as you indicate the date where it's to be heard again.
Michael Corrigan. He will be the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live immediately across the street from the seminary at 2401 Garden Street, and I'm in support of this whole concept, but with a desire to express a very serious concern that the concept of the landmark does include the grounds and does include public access to the grounds. Very clear statements were made by the owner to the entire community at the time that they began the renovation, that the fences that were put up around the property were there as a temporary measure for public safety purposes. Those fences eventually morphed into very permanent structures that, combined with armed guards and security cameras and everything else, make it a very unapproachable place for the public, and that's a serious concern. I'm not sure how to deal with it, but it's certainly troubling to me, and it seems inconsistent with the representations that were made to me and others at the time that the project was started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corrigan. I'll now close public comment and bring it to the commission. Questions? Anyone? Mr. Lavoie?
Mr. Lamont, we're not here to make a decision. We're only here to make a recommendation. City Council will make the decision. Am I correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Lavoie.
The other question that I have, could the report or could the submission to the City Council be modified to include Mrs. Day's information about potential archaeological remains on the site, which I think would be important for the deliberation?
Either in our report or either to the resolution to council to include that as a
Okay.
factor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
I recommend accepting the report as written. Do you want me to give you that?
No.
To make the motion?
No, it's different. It's not really true.
Mr. Chair, I do want to comment on the request for postponement or continuance. As you're aware, the council recently did designate a property without the owner's consent. So we do feel that even if the property owner would come to object maybe on the issue of the grounds being included in the designation, that council ultimately will take into account the owner's perspective on the issue, whether they're opposed or not. I think we are open to having you consider whatever facts the property owner might bring forward to you in your deliberation. I don't know if it might change your opinion on the matter, but certainly I think council probably would be more open to have had you consider that fact, those pertinent facts. So I'm just suggesting that we're in no hurry to send the recommendation to council. Matter of fact, the ordinance gives us 90 days upon submittal to the city clerk to bring the designation to the city council. So the question becomes, would council consider the fact that you didn't allow the property owner to come forward? And we did give adequate notice, but we weren't aware they were out of the country. So we do try to coordinate that.
I think it would behoove the commission as well as council if we did postpone recommendation of the resolution. But go ahead,
Mr. Chair, I really do not think we should cancel the recommendation.
We wouldn't be canceling it, we would be postponing it. We would hear it again in 2 weeks to allow for response from the owner.
Okay.
That's the way I understand it, correct, Mr. Lemon?
So the next HLC.
You would continue the hearing to a time certain 2 weeks from now, and we would open up again and allow the public or the property owner and the public to comment again.
Well, I just think that it's a task of the commission to respond to this nomination and make their statements. This is agendized item, and we should make our statements. And if it's continued to the next one, then at least the owner would know what the commission thinks.
So
I'd rather
I
not
don't-
postpone it to accommodate the to accommodate the owner. I mean, this letter to them was sent in April. The
Okay.
letter was sent to them about this nomination,
May I make a
and we haven't
suggestion?
heard.
May we get the commissioner's comments and then continue it
Yeah.
2 weeks?
That would be
Not
the-
postpone it, but continue it 2 weeks.
That would be the appropriate thing, I think.
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Rios.
Question of staff. Would a continuance also allow you to write up statements regarding what Ms. Day said about the
Archaeology.
potential archaeology on the site?
Yes, it would allow us to amend the resolution that you adopt and include some more substantiation of the concern that you expressed about cultural resources. on
I
the
think
property.
that it would be an important item to have in our pocket as we move forward.
Would you like to make a motion to that
No,
effect?
not really.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's still more comment. Beg your pardon.
As a member of the designation subcommittee, I can't tell you how many years we have requested this to be landmarked, how many years we've been told the owners in Europe or somewhere in the world, it has happened
Over and over.
10 times. And Mary Rose, she agrees to this. It's just, I agree with the 2-week continuance. However, this is not the first time, second time, or fifth time we've heard this.
Okay, well, that should be an important part of our comments then when we make the motion.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, I feel very, very strongly that this has been going on
Microphone.
as long as I can remember, which is a heck of a long time. And
Okay, what did you wear yesterday?
Stop it.
you don't want to know.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ma-
Thank you, Ms.
Mr.
Shea.
Chair, I really appreciate that, okay? The fact that you care really matters to me. However, I will agree to putting it out for 2 weeks, but absolutely not anymore.
Commit.
That's my comment.
Okay, and we'll make it part of the motion. Commissioner Winnick?
I concur. I also, personally, I would like to hold comments till after giving the owner the opportunity to present to us. But everybody else can do as they like. But I think it would be great to have it in 2 weeks and no longer.
Okay. Who wants to make a motion? The comments are all finished. Go ahead, Commissioner Lavoie.
Postpone this item.
No, continue it.
Continue for 2 weeks and no longer. With the request from staff to include Mrs. Day's comments in the more elaborate description of the site characteristics, including the mature landscaping, perimeter landscaping, the landscaping as it relates between this building and the Mission and this building and Garden Street, or this complex and the Mission and Garden Street.
I'll second the motion, and I have a question of staff. May we
Under
also,
discussion? Go ahead.
may we also have a report on staff on the problem with the fence, which is evidently a violation, what the status is?
Yes, I think Ms. Rose can comment on that the next
Thank
hearing.
you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Motion by Lavoie, second by Arias. Thank you, all of the public, for coming out. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you coming. We are 20 minutes behind. The next item is item number 5, which is a proposed Santa Barbara Historic Style Guide. Okay, we are taking a 5-minute recess.
I know.
So annoying.
Don't worry, they're mostly eye candy.
Very happy to have Anthony Grumby from Harrison Design Associates. He's going to present an overview of all the work that we've been trying to work with him on architectural styles. It's actually a project that was commenced about 2 years ago. Yeah, and he's done a lot of great work. We're very happy to have had his volunteer or his firm allow him to work on this project. The vision is that this work will be used by a appointed Historic Landmarks Commission committee that work on our historic resource design guidelines and architectural style guidelines that will help when we create districts. So these are the representative styles that he's done some work on. We'd like to fly through them today, just give you an update and offer some quick direction on whether we're on the right track.
Okay, should I set a timer?
Well, see how fast Anthony can talk.
Well, begin the charge.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. This is very exciting because it's the culmination of, over 2.5 years. I started with Jake Jacobus and learned a lot from him, touring around, running around everywhere, and getting permission to photograph and then draw as well, some of these buildings. So with that, as you all know, this is a great 1890s shot of Santa Barbara. And as you all know, there's a lot more than just Spanish colonial revival in Santa Barbara. And so that was the sort of the key impetus for Jaime's asking of us to help out and do the style guide. Was there are so many other styles that you encounter that wouldn't it be great to have some details worked out and shown, and an overview of the styles for those who might not know as much about them. So as you see, there's a lot of Victorian, and then of course there's only one Spanish building on the whole map in 1890s. So this is a timeline that kind of shows through bird's eye view
the plan and perspective of each of the different styles. So, and this is the 12 styles that are on our first round here. And then I included as well the early Spanish, even though technically it's not on the style list. There's not a lot of Adobe building going on, but the Presidio folks would argue with that. So I'll throw in one for free, Jaime, if you the 13th style, but it might not be the best time to throw it in because it might sink the ship. So as an example, this is the current format of it. We have for each style we have an aerial perspective, the plan, and that helps to also explain the social context for how the houses were lived in and how the spaces were. So hopefully with sensitive renovations, we can think along the lines of how they lived then, how that affected the exterior and interior of the buildings, and how that could be done well now. So, and then it goes into details of things such as massing and overall form, and then some ideas of some of the typical detailing there are characteristics of that style. So with each style, there are ranges of massing studies and ranges of window studies and columns and such things. And as well, people are given the information about those details that give more than just picture books. So a short history, how it relates to both the style on a national context and the style in particular to Santa Barbara and how that relationship happened. And then some photos of our exemplars within our city that we have permission to photograph. And then following those, the idea will be that we'll have multiple other pages of photographs that we can add to, and it can be kind of a living document in the sense that if those of you who know great examples, we can go and get permission and photograph those as well. These were some of the resources that were used, not an exhaustive list, but taken details from different books at the time, especially ones that were pertinent to Santa Barbara in terms of what some of the details that worked out commonly within our landscape and cityscape. So here we have an example of the early Spanish. I wanted to now just sort of walk through the styles very quickly, and so you get a flavor for the different styles that are going to be shown in here. So this is showing the thick walls, the 3-foot thick walls of adobe, construction methods of heavy timbers, and how that affects the overall architecture. It's Casa de la Guerra. That's what that section was about. And then as well, of course, our Presidio. And as well, one of the things that might be interesting to add for the early Spanish is that it's being done now with the Presidio, and so it even shows how adobe buildings can be added to using steel and concrete under structure. So, okay, so now leaving the early Spanish, we'll go to the Italianate here. So the early sort of 1870s Italianate. Looking at it from books and how those who built them would have referenced it. Here's a good example of not a house, even though obviously most of the examples and most of the work is going to be done on the house level of the residence. There's also that style sort of carries through all the way, and so it's important to kind of look at the range, especially if we have good examples. Look at the range of styles. So here's the great Italianate examples: Italianate brackets here, heavy cornice, low slope roof. Here's an example on Chapala, great example. Here, the square posts, again the paired Italianate columns, a tower element, has a cupola there. Here we have massing, the basic massings of the Italianate. In general, the styles follow forms of massings, depending on the style, and so that's always a good thing to point out, as well as the pitch of roofs, because that helps to tell that story of the style. Here's giving details like this that kind of try to really embody the quality that we're going for here. It's not just Home Depot. Not to say that Home Depot is bad, but just it's not just buying something off the shelf and sticking it up on your house and calling it a day. It's to look at what was really done and why, and then help to inform that architecture. Early Gothic, Carpenter Gothic, sort of connected with Neo-Gothic, but in general out here it's mostly done as a Carpenter Gothic, done in wood. Things like details like the shingles and how you can change from fish scale to diamond to octagon, then hexagon. So, and then things like the doors, of course, are so important. Details like moldings and how this shape of molding tells so much more about the Carpenter Gothic than, and this depth, especially things like right here, that depth, gives a shadow line and gives a character to the style that's much more than just one particular, pointed arch or things like that people associate with the style. So there's a church on Chapala. It was moved, and it was yeah. Yeah, it's been moved twice. Yeah, okay. So I didn't realize it was twice, and it actually shows up on that first aerial map. There's a drawing of it. It's missing its top steeple here. But another Carpenter Gothic. So I heard. Jake would tell me stories about that one. Now moving on to the stick style, where the stickwork divides the wall into planes, and those planes get different treatments sometimes. One of the advantages of doing drawings is that sometimes the house isn't in the greatest shape, and you can kind of complete as the house might be given a good renovation. And also you can't see things like peeling paint. So, and then, this is a great example on Victoria Street. The aptly named the stick house on Victoria Street. Another stick house is in Brinkerhoff. This was sort of our sort of initial jump-off point. Here you have the siding change from horizontal to vertical, and it's a great example. To folk Victorian, so it's this sort of simple form, but in later Victorian examples where Queen Anne starting stick is in full swing, and yet they're kind of going back to the simple form here. Now this I did not intend this morning. I saw the sign, so this is not like some kiss up. Okay, well there you go. Okay, so it works. But this is one of our examples of the folk Victorian. So you have a little bit of a sort of a Queen Anne gable here with the shingles, but at the same time it has a very simple massing and simple porch. So another folk Victorian on the southwest side of the freeway that was moved that Jake was telling me about and took me to. Queen Anne. So here we have the Queen Anne Tower and wraparound porch, all the typical Queen Anne elements, which we actually have a lot of here, as you know. And so the basic massing of the Queen Anne, these fantastic examples here on Chapala, very well redone. The curved windows that you find within the Queen Anne Tower. This is a good example on Bath Street, and this has a little story with it. For those of you who might know me, probably know that I have a good group of boys. I have 5 sons, and when we're driving around, I'll ask them what the architecture styles are for different houses. Yeah, I'm obsessive compulsive. But they actually like it for now. And so we were turning the corner. This is right by our office, and we were turning the corner. And I wasn't asking about the styles at the time. I was talking with my wife, and my 4th son Samuel, who was 6 at the time, said, "Dad, look, it's a Queen Anne's Revenge." So I haven't talked to Jaime about changing the name yet, but we could go with Queen Anne's Revenge here. So and then as a subcategory of the Queen Anne is also the Queen Anne Free Classic, which, because it's so prominent within Santa Barbara, Jake really decided that it should have its own category, because it's such a both unique and also developed sort of in a simplified way, in the sense that you have a lot of almost American colonial revival elements, but at the same time within a Queen Anne asymmetry, Queen Anne shingles, and there's sort of the Queen Anne elements, but it's done in a pretty unique way, and so that it has become its own style category in total for us. And here we have this sort of Tuscan column and free classic window. On to Mission Revival here. So we have some great examples of Mission Revival and done in sort of in the Victorian time. At the end of the Victorian time, it has a lot of Victorian details in a certain sense, but of course it has very strong identifying mission gable and other mission features such as the red tile and brackets and plaster. Our great example in our train station. And then of course we can't forget Crocker Row on Garden Street, 5 houses in a row. With yes, we won't look at, don't look at the S tile. Hey, it's a spec house, okay? You gotta give him a break. Over now, but you gotta hold the weight. Okay, it's practical too. So then on to the Craftsman, and so of course Craftsman is a strong style within our community. A low pitched roof, sort of some basic Craftsman simple forms, and then of course this detail kind of shows the summary of the Craftsman, some of the beauty of it, where you have this large rafter being carried by the knee brace here, and that bracket comes down to the column, this squat column. You can really feel the weight of the roof kind of bearing down on it, and it punches through the capital down into the base. That detail is picked up with the brickwork all into the plaster pier, and so this entire simple column connection is really kind of tells the whole story of the quality that we're hoping that this helps to carry on the tradition in Santa Barbara and even make it better. So here's our one green and green, as I'm told, and I'm sure all of you know it. And then on to Italian Mediterranean, and one of the kind of key things about this was David Gephardt explains how the Italian Mediterranean and Spanish and sort of all the Mediterranean mixes are the early stages of Santa Barbara, 1910s, 15s to 20s, before Santa Barbara really takes that Spanish colonial and runs with it. And so sort of giving a nod to the Italian Mediterranean, I think, is proper, and we have some good examples here. So, in the city with its hipped roofs, its very strong symmetry, details like the cornice line, the gutter, the tiles, all those things are just refined, such as the window surrounds, the formality of these, the dog ears here. So all those things are Italian elements that play a part of our history here. American colonial revival is really a part of almost every American town, and certainly here as well. Good porch details. One of the other aspects of this that we're going to be sort of building on is that Jaime really wants, and now I know Nicole really likes as well, are the, sorry, Ms. Hernandez, are the window details, because it's such an important part of a style and getting the details right. And so part of this as well is going to be doing at least enough window details that carry through all the styles so that it can be explained to people why this double hung window, first of all, it's double hung. Both of these are operable. There's two weights in there to show that. The thickness of the wall, the construction method, 2x4s, how these details all work out, the siding overlap, the simple moldings, but how all those simple little details work out to really give that high quality of architecture. And then on to period revival, which in this case our Tudor friends win the day for our period revival for now. And so they're sort of the most common that we've found. So having this steep pitched roof, having things such as the swoop and the asymmetrical entrance. So we have some really good examples of how a period revival style, such as the Tudor, can then accommodate things like technology with the automobile. And so even though this is quoting an old Tudor, 1200s England, it's at the same time the language allows for, as long as you feel the mass of these walls and having a large opening in the bottom and having carriage or garage. And so that's also part of the goal with this is to kind of give those hints at how to accommodate our style of living and our way of living and our culture based on a language that or various languages that formed at different cultural periods. So, and then the Tudor, part of almost every style is the column, is the pier, and the language of that really helps to set the tone for things. So things like the fake thatch, this rolled gable, and even if you're doing it in asphalt shingle, and again another tall chimney example, half timbering, all those little details that make Tudor Revival really, really different from others. Then of course we have Spanish colonial revival, and that's George Washington Smith before, and then also showing things like the difference between thick walls and thin walls, how that makes a window read, what the character that gives a place, and helps to, as one of my friends likes to say, tell a really good story. If you're telling this story, even if it's in a wood frame, you're telling this great fiction story that this was really a load-bearing masonry wall, and you have to make it believable. Otherwise, it starts to look kind of Disneylandish. Again, nothing against Disneyland. And then this is sort of the last great example I want to end on, which is the Fielding Institute, Hodges Residence, Windsor Sewell. And this is a great example of the simplicity of detail. This is not the Andalusian Spanish colonial revival, but it is Spanish colonial, and it has that mix of Mediterranean, and the strong symmetry here. But one of my favorite details, and one of those subtle details, is to boost, for example, to boost the roof tiles so that you have this beautifully, the only purpose of that, nothing functional whatsoever, is past the gutter line. The only purpose of that is just to paint that shadow line along the building. And that little subtle detail makes all the difference in the world, and those are the type of details that we're trying to hone in on. And then finally, this is my last little ode to Jake, who one of his all-time biggest pet peeves is wrapping a chimney in siding, and in this case, you even have some brick left over. And then this is the magical levitating chimney, which has absolutely nothing underneath it, and it's just a siding chimney that's hovering. So this is the what not to do. So this is what this is why we're here. That's the purpose of the style guide. And
So I just wanted to give you an update today because this effort is actually being shared with the community. Some of the work that he did for our guidelines are actually being conducted as part of his efforts to educate the community as well. So we will be asking a committee of this HLC to work on these guidelines soon. That's one of Nicole's efforts in the next coming year, and we expect that to be our next guideline effort. And as you well know, you are very instrumental in deciding what type of photos to include in our guidelines and what type of examples. So if you have seen any examples out there, done that, we would like to have that input as well.
Okay. May I suggest that the title of the document not include the word guideline, just so that it doesn't get confused with the El Pueblo Viejo
We'll work on that, obviously.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Boucher? Is your microphone on?
Oh, it is. Then I ran into Jake last week.
I hope you didn't hurt him.
Okay. Yeah, I hope he's doing well.
He is so cruel.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah, he's doing well. He looked good,
Good,
and
good.
he's walking better.
Good.
And he's
Good. Another just quick comment that I'll make is that the photos need to have locations on them so people can actually go see it in real life. And to the extent possible, more emphasis on public or commercial buildings, particularly since the Historic Landmarks Commission deals mainly with those types of buildings as opposed to single-family residences. I know the resources are limited, but nonetheless.
Mr. Sudin, you also have to realize that the impetus behind this is we know we're going to deal with historic districts, so this is really geared towards the homeowner, and so that's why we're emphasizing those type of buildings.
No problem. Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Lavoie.
Amazing document already, thank you. One of the strongest parts and of most use to architects are the massing studies, that a style is defined by its mass, not by its detail. That the massing is very important.
That's where you start.
That's where you start. And could you send a copy to the Natural History Museum?
Now, Mr. Lavoie, that was out of line.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Sharp.
I would echo Bill's comments, and
except for the last one,
massing,
please.
Yeah. The massing and
Quiet, please.
the simplicity and the marriage of those two, which most architects don't understand, in my estimation, is if they ever get it, it'll really help.
Okay. Any other commissioners' comments? Other than Mr. Lavoie.
I just wanted to really thank you personally for your passion and enthusiasm about this. Is really fun. So
Great.
look
All
forward
right.
to the next time.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you very
good.
much.
Yep, very helpful. Okay, next item on the agenda is item number 6, 1000 Chapala Street. This is a proposal to install a 200-square-foot prefabricated bike station module in a city parking lot number 3 near the current MTD bus station. The project is being funded by a Measure A grant. Would you please introduce yourselves for the record?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Jessica Grant, Project Planner for Public Works, with me today.
Parking Superintendent.
Yes.
I'll do it. There you go. 3.
Yeah.
And then, please.
All right. So thank you for having me here today. I'm here for a concept review of the bike station module prefabricated structure project. It's to be located at city parking lot number 3, which is right at the corner of Carrillo and Figueroa Streets. For those that aren't familiar with Bike Station, we do have one existing Bike Station facility. It's right next to the Granada Garage. And what Bike Station is all about is providing secured bicycle parking for members of the public. And it's a membership that they apply to. And they get, it's basically an access controlled facility to use at any time. There was a lot of support for having a bike station secure parking at this city parking lot number 3, mainly because it's located directly adjacent to the MTD Transit Center. And it would help facilitate multimodal commutes, and also that there's been an increase in bike theft in the area at the transit center, and there's been more of a demand for this type of facility for secured bicycle parking. We currently do have 6 bicycle lockers that would be removed as part of this project. So to get familiar with the location, I don't have all the pictures number, but starting in the lower left-hand corner, that's a shot where I was just in city parking lot number 3 looking down. The reason why we are putting it at this location, what we thought was more ideal, is because we don't have to displace any parking. Mm-hmm. It's going in a large center median. So if you follow me to the next picture, this is picture number 2. Essentially what we would do is there's a hedge here. We would go, and then right next to this hedge is the exit aisle for cars getting out of lot 3. So we would go a foot off of the curb and then pour a concrete pad, and then it would go pretty much to the center of the sidewalk. Again, the interior dimensions of the structure is 10 by 20 feet. Exterior, we'd probably have about 6 inches on either side for the stucco that we would be proposing. So then that would be 11 by 21 feet. From the public right-of-way, it's approximately, and that's picture number 3, it's about 125 feet from the sidewalk as I was standing on Chapala looking past the transit lot. Again, this is a quick, and if someone was taking the bus and there wasn't enough bike rack or available on the bus, that somebody can quickly go to this area to the secured bicycle storage.
Okay, so wrap up your presentation.
So this is a Measure A funded grant. It's going to be a contractor supplied design, which is a little bit unique for the city processing. So the concepts that I'm showing here today were some concepts that Bike Station drew up for us during the grant application process. So we're looking for feedback from HLC if basically on the facade of the module. And ideally we would like to have it stucco and stucco that we could paint over time, because our downtown parking facilities are a constant target for graffiti. We'd be looking at doing colors that are similar to our existing parking structures. I do have This is a board that we had used for when we did the repainting at Lot 10. It used to be kind of the Mayan sun color is what we went away with, and we replaced it with the stone beige as the base color, and Lot 10 is the Ortega parking lot. and then this is the Arizona white's the main color. So because we have a plethora of this paint, we'd be and there's we're open to other colors too, but there's about 6 colors that we use from our downtown parking facilities. So if the structure does get tagged, that we have enough paint to quickly paint over it. And we are also looking for feedback on the roof, whether to go to a more two-piece mission style clay tile roof, or I do have some pictures in the right over here. This is the last sort of prefabricated structure that we had done for Lot 4, and it's a metal roof, and we wanted to get your feedback what style you might be looking at. There was another one, a bike station done. This is not a prefabricated structure that I'm showing you, but it's at Claremont, the bike station facility there, and that one does not have a roof. It's just a flat roof. So that's concludes my presentation.
Okay.
I'm looking for guidance.
I'll open public comment. Seeing no public, I'll close public comment. Bring back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Winnick, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Boucher, question?
No.
Commissioner Sharp?
Not yet.
Commissioner Murray? Commissioner Lavoie?
No.
Commissioner Arias? No? Comments? Anybody want to jump in? Mr. Lavoie?
First thing, looking at the rendering, the plaster needs to go into the ground without a break at the slab, whatever the building looks like. It needs to be simplified. It's a small building. Don't try to make it any more elaborate than it needs to be. And having said that, there's nothing wrong with a flat roof. I mean, you know, to end the discussion of a tile roof on a building this small is a bit much. A metal roof is inappropriate on a building this big. A flat roof is just fine. With just a very simple parapet. Keep the windows simple. Don't surround them. Don't just keep it as absolutely dreadfully simple as you can keep it, and it will be fine.
I actually wanted to go back to a question. How will you provide protection from people breaking these windows? Will there be grills inside or out?
We normally don't have a problem.
Microphone.
We normally don't have a problem in the parking facilities with people breaking windows.
Okay.
Luckily, that hasn't been an issue.
Good. Well, okay, great. Okay. So, Mr. Lavoie, those are good comments. Anybody else have any comments? Commissioner Villas?
I'd like to see it broken up with some form of landscaping, be it vines or something, to soften it. Because I don't really sense it's Santa Barbara.
Okay. Good comment. Any other comments?
One comment.
Mr. Sharp.
You mentioned deep set windows.
Right.
It's
How deep is deep?
I think we haven't gotten to that detail, but if there's a rule of thumb that you're looking at, I can provide that direction to bike station.
Well, at least 2 inches.
Okay.
Oh, I'd say more like 6.
I know.
But,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You're the
2
specialist.
We're dealing
For,
with
yeah, for a building this size,
different
it is,
animal
yeah,
here.
it's pretty small. So 2 inches, I guess, is good.
How about 4? 4.
Well, Mr. Sharp says 2.
No, 4's better.
Okay.
Twice as good, actually.
Let's make it exponentially.
Okay. I think 4 is better too. Okay. So, any other comments? Okay. Okay. So, looking for a motion. You're not ready for final, so
Right.
indefinite.
Yes, that would, the next stage in the game is to provide. We're going to be drawing up a contract for design build, basically, and we provided them with the comments that we received today. And
Okay.
indefinite continuance would be great, and we'll see you shortly once bike station's under
And
contract.
don't forget to propose what lighting you are proposing.
Yes.
Okay. So we had a motion by Lavoie, a second by Boucher. Oh, for indefinite continuance. Huh? You didn't.
Summarize the comments.
Okay. Would you like me to summarize the comments? Okay, sure. A flat roof may be the most appropriate style roof or form of roof. There shall be no separation between the stucco and paving. Study adding landscape, perhaps a vine. The windows shall be a minimum of 4 inches deep. The sill shall be a minimum of 4 inches deep. Is that right? Keep the building simple in its form and detailing. Also, study lighting. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. There you have it.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
Yes, very good.
Next item on the agenda is item number 7, 1220 Chapala Street. This is a second concept review for a alteration to city parking lot number 5, including the following: convert the current entry on West Victoria Street to an exit, install an 80 square foot pre-manufactured kiosk, associated parking equipment, and electrical service. Realign the exit driveway. New landscaping and frontage improvements from the access drive to the eastern property line of the adjacent parcel, Victoria Hall, includes a sidewalk extension. A total of 625 square feet of surface will be repaved. Our last review was on August 1st. And our comments at that point were: the landscape plan is supportable, the scheme as presented is supportable, the kiosk is supportable, study an unpainted brick material for the kiosk base, provide drawings that include existing and proposed, and provide drawings that indicate what is existing and what is proposed, better coordinate the drawings in a more of a final format. Restudy the proposed location for the kiosk in consideration of the sycamore tree/trees. Introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation, please.
Jason Curry, Project Manager, PMSM Architects. Victor Garza, Parking Superintendent.
Is that different from what you submitted?
This is slightly different.
Okay, you will need to fill out a blue form.
Okay, so we're not using these, right?
He said slightly different.
Let's use these.
What changed? Just briefly.
Layout of the parking equipment.
That's significant.
Okay, so I can show you. That's the building didn't change.
Okay.
Whose mic isn't on?
Nobody said anything.
Nobody said a word, right?
Sorry.
Introduce yourself. Oh, you already did. Presentation, please.
I think if we can, let's turn to sheet A3-101. That gives us an overall site plan.
A3-101.
So this plan now is showing a little bit of an overlay of the existing condition with the new. This red dashed line indicates the location of the existing curb. So the one change that I was talking about, we have this parking equipment here. So this is the gate, and there's 2 bollards on one on either side of it. In the previous set of plans, that gate was right here. So it's a minor little change. The slab that sits on is within the footprint of the existing roadway, so it's not encroaching anymore on the planter area. But I thought it was important just to get the final set of plans that shows that. So to orient us here, from this overall plan, the larger scale plan number 3, that's showing the existing equipment that's to be relocated. And then plan 2 is showing the new plan with the location of the kiosk. So you can see here on the blow-up, this is where the existing curb is. And now if we can turn to sheet A3301, these are elevations with context, showing a little bit of height and height of the adjacent buildings. And actually I've got color renderings, so maybe I'll bring those up as well. So this top one here, we're looking, this is the north elevation. This is the view from Victoria Street. This is where the exit drive would be. And here's the kiosk and the new landscaping that we're proposing in the planter area. This is the east elevation, so it's cut straight down the drive. And we're looking at this is kind of the driver's view, I guess, of the kiosk. Again, showing the new landscaping throughout in the planter, all the way out to the Parkway planter. And here's a view from the south, kind of as you're approaching the booth, and the opposite long elevation looking, this is the west. The materials that we're proposing, so it's very similar to the kiosk that was put in at lot floor, except for now we're looking at doing the brick base, which was a comment from the last go-around. But it would have a copper standing seam roof with copper gutter and downspout. And this is then a metal painted window frame, door frame. The landscaping that's proposed around the planter area, my landscape architect's not here, but I'll just wing it. So it's
You want help pronouncing things?
You've got the expert.
It looks to me like they're proposing things that are a bit more drought tolerant. We have Carissa Macacarpa, which is a bulletproof plant. Alice Spinosima is another bulletproof drought tolerant plant. Strelitzia is the bird of paradise you're all familiar with. Cypress formoseophianum is cream palm. Raphiolepis umulata, another parking lot. No, parking lot plant is bulletproof as anything. Dianella is also a textural flowering bulletproof plant.
Thank you. I think it'll bring in a very nice color palette to liven up this area around the kiosk.
Okay. Is that it?
One other comment from the last HLC hearing was a question of if traffic had looked at this layout, and we had an email from traffic to staff explaining that they had looked at it.
And what was the outcome of their review?
And the layout reflected what they had proposed.
Okay.
He had a very slight, Derek Bailey said that the curb alignment concept is acceptable. We requested some very minor tweaks in the last round of comments, and I can't tell if those have been incorporated. No offsets were shown, but it appears as though they have. We're going to request the ramp at the reconstructed parking lot entrance off Victoria Street be shifted slightly to the north.
So I haven't seen that formal comment yet, but I suspect that we're just going to bring that up to the line that's in the public right-of-way as opposed to the property that's a city-owned lot.
Just for the record, what's the disposition of the sycamores at this point?
So they're still existing to remain. We think that it's just a slab on grade. It's not a footing foundation.
Bob? I pretty much took care of it for you.
My apologies.
Except we're up to the question of the sycamore.
Yeah, if you could just add your 2 cents on the sycamore. What's the disposition of the sycamores?
We're still proposing and intending to preserve the tree, the one that's closest to the kiosk. I think we added a note. Truthfully, I can't recall exactly what the note said, but it was an additional protective measure.
Are his plans in here?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chair, that would be, and Bob, is that the mitigation measures that I emailed you? The Bio 1, Bio 2, Bio 4, and Bio 8?
Susan, I apologize.
Okay, here we have...
I haven't had a chance to review. these plans because they were just submitted, so that's what I would have been looking for.
Okay, we have a note that says existing Platanus acerifolia to be protected in place, typical. Hand excavate for kiosk slab construction. Excavate using only hand tools under the supervision of the City of Santa Barbara arborist. Install 18-inch by 12-foot long root control barrier at the edge of construction if required by arborist. If the arborist determines that the Platanus will not survive the kiosk construction, the Platanus shall be removed, and one 24-inch box callistemon viminalis, that's a weeping bottle brush, shall be planted to replace the Platanus.
If I may add,
yes,
the city arborist has the authority to make determinations regarding the health and safety of trees under city jurisdiction, and would be loath to remove that tree unless he felt it was absolutely necessary with regard to the safety of the tree and the safety of the public in terms of the tree's ability to remain standing. I have serious doubts that we're going to cause enough damage to the root system of that tree.
Especially if you're hand excavating.
Yeah, that would necessitate that.
I agree. Okay. Finished with your presentation? You're finished.
We covered it.
Okay.
But
All
I
right.
believe those, what I just gave you, that was emailed to the
Yeah, I'll make
applicant.
that as part of my comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll open public comment. We have John Rowbottom as the only speaker. Mr. Cunningham is relinquishing his chair and microphone to you.
John Rowbottom for 21 Victoria. I find the plan.
John, speaking of
I find the plan to be, thank you, to be really well designed. I like the landscaping there. I think the overall effect is very good. The color will add a good. I think the plants are well chosen. The only concern is the actual kiosk itself is directly in front of our main entrance to the restaurant, which is sort of a historic elevation on the building. But from what I understand, according to parking, it is required because of the room to queue up for parking exiting. But if you look at, I think, is it this one? This one.
This is
yeah.
your building here.
Yeah, this is our building. Directly behind there
is the stairway and the entrance.
Is the entryway into an alcove with a 4-foot wide.
The
door.
only time really that kiosk would block it is when you're actually
looking straight on.
Straight on, but you would definitely still see that wonderful little alcove entry.
Exactly.
From there.
Yeah, and you can see there's quite a bit of room between, but it is nonetheless directly in front of it.
Sure.
It would be our preference if we had any ability to change it, to put it at the lower end of the lot where there's more height, less restriction on the height.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'll close public comment, bring it to the Commission for questions. Commissioner Arias, any questions? Commissioner Lavoie? No. Murray? Sharp?
No.
Boucher? Winnick?
I just want to follow up on that one comment. Is it possible for the kiosk to be back farther? And if not, I just want to know the answer to that question, basically.
It's not, I don't think, because they need the queuing distance for exiting this distance here. Is that correct? I'm sorry.
That's correct. And within this area up here, there's also an existing electrical vault right here. So we're kind of within this area, pinned in between that existing vault and staying away from the tree. But the idea of moving it there, that would take away the queuing distance.
Okay.
Correct.
I have a question. Can this change wait until I can't remember the name of that project now across the street.
Arlington?
well, the Vaughn's, but they gave it a name and I can't remember the name. The Vaughn's project, sorry, and the Victoria Street project are finished. Can this project wait until those are finished in order to better assess the traffic patterns that those buildings are going to be causing? Because nobody can predict really what is going to happen with traffic on Victoria Street or Chapala or State Street with the buildings happening. So my question is, can the project wait?
So there's a component of the project which really has to be done at the same time as the Victoria Hall remodel, and that's the work that's in the right-of-way. They're really going to want to do this section of road work that continues all the way down
Okay.
to...
Let me ask it another way then. If that is the curb configuration as part of the Victoria Street Theater project, could that still serve, does the geometry still work for that to serve as an entrance?
I'd have to have transportation look at that, but that's possible.
Okay. So, Mr. Garza, I'd like you to weigh in. Could the project wait until traffic patterns are sort of better established and evaluated? I really hate to see the entrance off of a side street that is closer to State Street, easier to find, eliminated or changed to an exit. I just really think that's a mistake.
I hear you and I appreciate your comment. The problem right now is that the demolition and the construction depends on having that exit in place for at least a year, for at least for the time that the construction is going on. And
why is that? The construction of this.
No, excuse me. The back of the theater is going to be demolished.
Right.
They're going to be taking out the existing exit. They're going to use that as an entrance to the construction area. So during that time, they're going to need this to become an exit.
Oh, the existing exit on Chapala.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't understand that. Oh. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, if you have any other operational type of questions, I'd be glad to answer them anytime other than this meeting if you'd like.
Why, do you want to go somewhere? No. You got an appointment now? Got a date? Yes, Commissioner Lavoie.
Make a motion for final approval of the drawings as submitted.
Second.
I had a motion by Lavoie, second by Arias. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Abstain?
Can you please include the conditions that I...
Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
I had it written down. I'm sorry, Ms. Gantz. The plans shall include the biological resource tree mitigation measure notes, bio-1, bio-2, bio-4, and bio-8. And that's it. So I'm opposing on just the principle of the change in exit
Sorry,
versus
did you guys
entry.
vote? I missed
Yeah,
that.
we
Okay,
did.
thank you.
Sorry.
So you're the only one who's opposed?
We
Yeah.
have not voted.
I am. Yeah.
I
There was a second. I
seconded
asked all in favor, aye, opposed, and I said me. So I know we did vote. Unequivocally, I know we voted.
Whatever you say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair, I'm stepping down.
I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute yes
I need to get a
recess.
form from you.
Okay. Road, and this is a historic. Staff, Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, I did review the report and agree with its conclusions that the project meets the state CEQA guidelines of the MEA and the Secretary of Interior standards and will not result in any significant adverse impacts to the historic resource.
You did you?
Very carefully.
All right.
Ask the applicant.
We have the applicant here. Do they wish to say anything?
William Lavoie, architect for the project. I have the owner, Eric Gabrielson, in the audience, the man in the blue shirt.
Welcome. Anyone?
Oh. Well, just as, I'm Tim Hazeltine with Post Hazeltine Associates. The report really builds off an earlier report, which people may remember from Marymount about 10 years ago or so. And this report, of course, focuses on the mansion, the main house. And actually, a few years ago, we did a report for the former Gardener's Cottage, which is at 2134 Mission Ridge Road. With this project, I think probably the most questions will probably be about some of the changes at the roof level. And we'd be happy to go over any of our conclusions with you if you have questions or want some expansion on our text.
Okay. All right. I will open public comment. Seeing no public, I will close public comment. How am I doing, Mr. Winnick, with the public comment?
Great today.
Yeah.
I don't get to be the comedian.
Questions from the commission?
I have questions.
Yes, Commissioner Murray.
I wanted to know if the owner is willing to designate this as a landmark. It was.
Mr. Gabrielson, you need to come up to a microphone, please.
That would not be my preference. In that I think that that this review process is very valuable. In that it's being reviewed in this time with this change in mind, and so landmarking the building on into the future when conditions change and times change, I think is limiting and maybe somewhat threatening to the property. So it would be our preference not to landmark it. Obviously, we're very interested in the history and the value of the site and the architecture, but that would not, having that imposed on the property, I don't think is something we'd like to do.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
Yeah, I have a question for the historian. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see. This was really good report. It's just that it's a very dense because it builds up from another report. I find it hard to really follow through all the different things. So please bear with me with the questions. I wanted to know who designed the elevator tower.
Is there a particular page that's mentioned?
Well,
it was Sol Murphy
in
Hastings because it was late.
In 27 or in earlier?
Later.
So will that be like the 27?
It was the post-27. The Bolts actually, right after they purchased the property, they started making changes, and they actually continued after the death of Charles Bolt, and then Hilda, his wife, continued to make changes to shortly before she sold the property in the mid-30s.
So the elevator goes with those changes, you think?
It's one of the changes that were made, I believe, for her convenience. She used the rooftop in a slightly different way than the Blacks had. Clarence Black and his wife Mary used it more as a retreat, so he had a study at one side. She was a painter and used the north pavilion as her painting studio, and it originally had these really large windows like you'd find in an artist studio, and those were eventually removed, some by the Bolts, and then subsequently when the Marymount sisters owned the property, they continued to make changes to the rooftop to meet their needs. And I should say that Hilda Bolt used the upper floor as a bedroom, at least for a period of her occupancy, and so she was making additions, adding, we believe, the elevator tower to make it more convenient to get up to the roof level.
Actually, the Pamela Post, one of the authors of the report, on page 19, I found the reference in 1928, Charles Bolt had an elevator shaft
What
constructed.
paragraph?
That would be under modifications and additions to the north elevation.
Which bullet?
Be one to third bullet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it shows the permit number.
Okay.
Okay.
But it doesn't tell who designed it.
No.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that
That's why I was
most of
asking.
these
That-
additions were designed by Sil Murphy and Hastings. They did almost all the changes. At that time at this period. Here it is, 1928.
Okay. The other question I had was, where is the current garage and driveway? I had a hard time following the site plan and how and what is there now.
On the architectural site plan, this is
Page
the
1.0.
this is the original garage,
Okay.
and it was subdivided off of the property.
Okay. So where is the new garage going to now?
There's a new carport proposed for the back of the building and an existing auto court.
Okay, got it. Okay. The other question I had was, on page 48, I think 48 to 50, I was having trouble because the proposed is under south elevation on page 48. It said the applicant proposes to remove the enclosed space that composes the existing south pavilion. I was having a hard time figuring out what is that. What is that enclosed space that is being removed or
Okay, page 3.0.
The existing south pavilion includes a stairway, bathroom, there's a bedroom, another bathroom actually, and then a sleeping porch. And it seems to have been a series of additions, this being the original structure, as I understand it, which the photographs from 1915 upon the completion of the building, it looks like it started life as, there was a pergola on the roof, and this looks like it started life as a windscreen, whether it was roofed or not. It was roofed at some point, and then at some point in, I believe, 1930s, the actual pyramidal tile roof and roof, or the roof itself was lifted and a tile roof put on top of it.
Yeah, to expand on that, the plate height was raised. The original multi-light windows were removed, and then a tile roof was added on. We're not exactly sure when. Some of the early permits, it's kind of unclear when some of those additions were made because they're not actually spelled out in the permits. They just say changes to the second floor.
Okay. So you are proposing to remove
Remove
that,
all of that.
all of that, and
The-
including the roof. I mean, including
Yes, yes. The intent, I'll actually, I'd rather talk about that in the design
Yeah.
review, but the intent of the design is to restore it as closely as we can to the appearance of the building at this period.
Okay.
Oops.
Okay, I guess those are my questions for now.
This is your only chance for questions.
Well, that's it, because I think the other ones are just comments, so.
Any other questions from commissioners? I had just a couple. Isn't it kind of confusing to have or is it typical to have a portico share on one side of the building and an entry on the opposite side?
Yeah, I'll explain the genesis of how the building, when the Blacks purchased and the property and built the estate, the porte cochere was not there. That was added by the Bolts later. So there was a drive that went up here, and then it circled up to what's now the Marymont property. And that drive is still there. It's just on two parcels. And so originally, the Blacks,
Put the microphone.
the Blacks estate house was, I mean, not estate, pardon, the gardener's cottage and the garages were over here at what is now 2134 Mission Ridge Road. And that, of course, when the property was both this 2134 parcel, the 2132 that's the subject of this review, as well as what's now the Marymount property. And over the years, the property was subdivided really beginning in the 1970s. And between 1977 and I think the 80s, 2132, which we're dealing with today, and 2134 were still on the same parcel, and they were still using the old garage down here built by the Blacks as their garage. And then when the property was subdivided, the owners of 2134 built this little garage over here. So it's not historic, it's quite recent. And that's sort of the genesis of how that circulation existed. Originally, the cars would come up from the chauffeur's residence down here and just come up the drive. And I presume they came out here, or there was a drive here, and you could have stepped out through here, down from the central courtyard to here, and perhaps the chauffeur could pick you up there. Yeah.
Okay.
But the reason that
Somewhat
entrance
confusing.
facing west, which seems kind of counterintuitive, is the views at that time were unbelievable. You could see all the way out to the ocean.
Sure.
You sort of still can.
Okay. The other question I had was related to the potential period of historical significance. Would the potential period of historical significance for the building ever be different for the landscape?
Yes.
Yeah.
But in your professional opinion, you are not making that determination. You're determining that the original landscape architect who did it in the naturalistic style is more significant, and Ralph Talent Stevens is more of a contributing element to his landscape.
Well, I think we didn't focus on the landscape in the study because the
It's
project
mostly
isn't
gone.
having, a lot of it's gone. The hardscape is there.
Yeah.
The feel is there, that expansive feel of being on this ridgetop. But because most of what Ralph Stevens did was over on the Marymount property, that's where the Italianate style gardens and the terraces and
That's
the water
where
features
any of
were.
the extent.
Most of it
Most
is.
of it is.
Yeah.
And
exists
so
over there.
I believe because this project was not really impacting the historic landscape that was identified either in this report or in the previous Marymount report 10 years ago, we just didn't put in a separate discussion of the period of significance for the landscape because we didn't see that there was going to be an effect on it.
There's always an effect on the landscape.
Okay. Well, we can
I have an,
And I'll get to that as a comment, I think, because
I have another question too. I have another question when you're done.
Okay. Yes, I'll make that as part of the comments that I have. And then that's it on questions. So go
Questions?
ahead. Ms. Murray and then Commissioner Reyes.
Yeah, I forgot to ask one of the questions. On page 42, under there's the following elements of the house are not character defining, and one of them is the existing paving and fountain in the central courtyard.
What bullet? Where is that approximately?
It's like the last bullet.
Last bullet of the top paragraph.
The existing paving and fountain in the central courtyard are not character defining. And why is that? Did I miss something?
If you look in maps and figures, under figure 6, you'll see the historic condition of the courtyard is depicted, which is, you may notice, is different than
Do you
what
want
we
to
have.
put on?
Oh, sure.
Trying to get there. You got it already.
So that's the original condition.
And what's the condition now?
Now it's paved in a more regular fashion. It's not that sort of semicircular, sinuous.
That
It's in there,
picture
actually.
needs to be next to it so we know what it is.
Those pictures are in the architectural drawing?
Right
And they're
here,
actually in here,
figure
too.
16.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So this, it is currently exists as this, it was this.
It was that, and that's why we excluded that, those elements, because they're fairly recent and represent a change from the historic condition.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Rios.
Yes. What is the actual square footage of the lot that this house resides on? I read, but I couldn't find it.
It's approximately 2.3 acres.
2.37 acres, 103,410 square feet.
Okay. And question of the applicant, are you aware of the City of Santa Barbara fire prevention landscape requirements?
I can answer for the owner, yes, he is, and actually he has brought the property into conformance with those requirements.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? Comments? I'll make a comment then. On page 24, where it talks about the establishing the resources potential period of historic significance and historic themes, you clearly say that the house and the expansive grounds are the period that you have chosen as the potential period of historic significance. I think that's fine. I would like, though, if the report could possibly emphasize the importance of Ralph Talent Stevens's role in the development of the landscape architecture, particularly because he was a local landscape architect, born and raised here, not just transplanted here. I'm fine if you want to pick the other landscape architect as the naturalistic style as the point of historical significance, but there needs to be a little more weight on Ralph Talent Stevens, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just going to comment, so. Okay. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, I have comments. I have these two pictures, and my concern is that
You're talking about mostly the top ones.
my concern is I read that the period of significance is just about the black family, but when I look at these later additions by Sewell in 27, I find them very compatible, and understand that for a property. Really, to me, these changes have acquired a historical significance in their own right and should be preserved. And I am a little uneasy about just ignoring all those, what I think were very, very compatible changes, meeting the needs of that person at that time. And to me, they have acquired a significance that are not analyzed in the report to the extent that is convincing. And so that's really my concern. I also think that this is a very complex building. I think it'd be really good for us to visit it and see some of this. For myself, it would be really hard for me, be good for me to see the building and see the changes. I mean, I think what you're doing is a great changes. You're trying to bring this back to probably what it was in the. I'm just worrying about those additions that were done, and to me they have acquired significance. And when I look at these two pictures, sure, it was like this, but if you look at this, it's really blending fine. And I'm concerned about the tower, how it's going to be done. Bill LeBeau is one of the best architects in this. I'm not worried that I just want to make sure that whatever were done later that have acquired significance are recognized and analyzed. So that's where my discomfort is.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond.
Let's make sure everybody's done with their comments, I think. Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Lavoie.
Part of my architectural presentation, I'll launch into it now. I've worked on this house for 7 years now. My initial exposure to it was 7 years ago for a very minor interior remodel. And at that point, I pointed up at what is identified as the chapel and said, "Can I take that off, please? I don't want to do anything else, but let me take that off." And the owners approached me a year ago for the project, and I became much more intimately involved in the building as I began to document the whole thing to create the architectural drawings. And it was very obvious to me that one architect designed a house, and then from photographs understood that someone else imposed their design, a very different design, as the house was under construction, and added the stuff on the roof. The detailing of the windows on the ground floor is much more sophisticated than anything that appears on the second floor. Just the way the jambs and the sash and the window itself is constructed is very different, very much high-style architecture. The detailing of the main floor couldn't be simpler. I mean, it's exquisitely stripped down Palladian sort of building. Seen from the outside, the only really Spanish or Mission Pueblo Revival elements are on the courtyard. And they're very strong and very true to style. But the exterior is this very almost Austrian secessionist, very simplified, stripped down, plain building with this marvelous pergola on the roof. And then everything added after the core, after the first floor, is very much almost in a very different style. It's more Mission Revival or more Spanish Revival. The windows, the original windows that were put in were different. The window treatment is different. The fact that there's an express pyramidal tile roof on the exterior are all very different elements that I considered incompatible with the original design of the building. Particularly when you see it, the strength of the design as it was completed is a very strong, simple building. This makes it, I mean, this looks like an addition to me, and a very awkward addition.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, commissioners? I'll make one. Very good report. It was fascinating to me, not only because I lived in the neighborhood for quite some time, but also because it was one of our presidents considered Western White Houses. Also, my grandfather had some involvement with Clarence Black, so it was real fascinating for me to read the report, and I think it was an excellent job.
In the main house.
Okay, entertain a motion from someone.
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second it.
Okay, as is.
Yes.
You got changes you want to make?
I think both Fermina's and my comments are somewhat germane, but
I mean, Bill explained all that stuff. I would like those to be recorded in the report, because to me, it still doesn't justify it. Nothing in the report really explains why that is it's not compatible. So
your microphone's broken.
I would like to be, if it's okay with the preparer of the motion, to add those. That would be good, because I think that standard 4 needs to be answered.
And I would like a little bit more discussion about the significance of Ralph Talent Stevens and that. So if the maker of the motion is okay with those two changes?
I can tell you that I know for sure that it was very rough stucco.
Yeah. Is the seconder of the
Okay, so
motion?
I believe if you can just summarize those 2 extra comments that you want as part of that motion, because Fermino's talked a little bit, now you've talked a little bit, so I think we need to be a little bit more clear in the motion.
Well, I would just like to add, considering all the comments that were made by the architect of the project and the historians, I just want standard 4 to be answered and part of the report.
Okay, and then that the author of the...
we did, they did say that they didn't, that standard 4 didn't apply, so if they could revise that and address the concerns of how
I
the project
think
doesn't meet
that's
our
all
outcome.
I'm asking, and
Okay,
I don't think
we need some feedback input from the author. Yeah.
I'll start off with, I'm not sure that we would change our conclusions on standard 4 because our consideration and conclusion is that the changes, that the South Pavilion was so altered after its original construction that it doesn't retain its architectural integrity, and that's why it's a non-contributor to the building's architectural significance. And we are aware that, as I think was delineated in the report, that when the South Pavilion was originally constructed, and then we traced as well as is documented the subsequent changes. So if we were saying that the changes had acquired historic significance, then in fact their removal would be a difficult thing to...
No, I'm not saying that you should. I'm not asking you to change your opinion or something. I just felt that those were added by one of the original architects, but there was no real convincing argument that they basically destroyed this original house. If you listen to what Bill was saying.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying is it
well, I
doesn't.
understand better now.
You know,
so if
you say to me, this do not meet standard 4 because blah blah blah, it just would make a lot of sense. It doesn't right now. That's all I'm saying.
So the comment is to revise standard 4, and I'm going to acquiesce on my Ralph Talent Stevens comment. It's not important. So there was just that one comment. The report is to revise.
So to accept the report with the proviso
Yes.
that the preparers revise standard 4.
Perfect.
I think you want to say address standard 4.
Address
not
standard.
revise.
Address
Yeah.
standard 4.
Address.
I know.
They did, but
Yeah.
I'm changing the word.
Okay, is the maker of the
Address in more
motion...
detail.
Is the maker of the motion okay with that? Okay, and the seconder?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Very good report.
Oh, thank you.
Paper.
Yeah, did you see it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it just didn't tie it back to the
Oh,
period of
Because we
significance.
talk about.
Yeah, it's the period of significance that I was getting after.
Oh, you don't want to get it?
No.
Are these the revised ones?
Yes.
I think I need a 5-minute break. No.
No.
Next item on the agenda is 2132 Mission Ridge Road. This is concept review of a proposal to demolish 2,407 square feet of first and second story floor area and restore the roof terrace with deck, columns, and pergola. Restore quatrefoil windows on the main level of the south elevation and install new windows and doors on the roof terrace. Also included is the demolition of a first floor breakfast room and adjacent exterior stairs. Restoration of original windows on the first floor and embellishment of the existing elevator tower. Required parking will be provided in a new 667 square foot attached 3-bay carport to be constructed on an existing paved auto court. If you'd introduce yourself, please, and brief presentation.
William Lavoie, architect for the project, and Eric Gabrielson in the audience, right there, the owner, one of the owners. As I mentioned, I've been intimately involved with this building for some time now, and it's one of those pieces of architecture that you learn from some very valuable lessons, how to build a stately, dignified building without being pretentious and or overly ornate. It's an exquisitely simple building. It couldn't be simpler in either its plan or its siding, in its detail. And it's really kind of an amazing thing to encounter. In our discussions of what to take off and where to stop, it was pretty obvious that the chapel that sits, the last thing added, the chapel sitting on top of the living room, was to be the first thing to take off. It was done with no sensitivity at all to the existing architecture. And John Pittman, God rest his soul, it did not do a good job on this one. So we started with a discussion of, well, what do I make it look like? Why don't I just take it off? And then we started taking stuff off and taking stuff off and taking stuff off. And the question was where to stop. And at one point, Eric and Terry told me, take it all off. Show us what it looks like with just the pergola on top of the building. And at that point, I took a deep breath and go, I've never had a client ask me to take this much square footage off a house, ever.
Or take it all off.
Or take it all off. And I did it. I came back to them with the renderings. And in the process of producing the renderings, realized that this was an even more amazing building without all of those additions added on. And so the strength of the design, the brilliance of the design, considering that this rather spectacular site that you could go up on the roof and walk the entire perimeter and look at the view from all kinds of different angles, realizing that there's a view of the ocean to the west over the Goleta Valley. There's a wonderful view of La Cumbre Peak to the north. There's a view over St. Anthony's Seminary, and you look down over the Mission, and you see the ocean over the mesa. It was an incredible site that they placed this house on, and they placed an incredible house on it. So the proposed work is to take off most of the additions that were done on the second floor. The house can be seen from several vantage points in the city. You can see it coming down State Street as you cross on Terre. It sits on the hill right there. I mean,
that's not on Terre, but...
Well, Alomar. It's been a while since. Alomar. And you look up and you can find the house. Some views from the house here, you get the sense of the neighborhood. Looking towards Westmont, the entry gates. Marymount. The entry gates, and the property was talked about that housed the garages that was split off before. The neighborhood is characterized by single-family residences with the exception of Marymount School. And here you see some of the views from the house itself. This is a view to the east, the old pool house across what was the pool. Coming up the driveway. The pool is still there, but it was split off and the property split. It does not belong to this property anymore. And then you come up quite a ways up the driveway, and the house begins to reveal itself. There was a question about the entrance to the house off to the side. When you come up to the house, it's obvious that this is the auto court, and you are to go up these stairs. And when you get up on a platform that is on the west front of the house, you have this absolutely breathtaking view of the entire valley.
Continue, I'm sorry. It'll be that view.
That view. And these photographs, the existing house, this is the chapel that I keep on talking about, that I always wanted to take off, and it actually blocks a rather magnificent view of La Cumbre Peak as you come up. The porte cochere on the opposite side. Back a house which faces east, which has been added onto and chopped up over the years, and is pretty much a mismatch of all kinds of things going on. The front door, in a very otherwise very plain facade, there's this turn spindle detail that shows up in the door surround and in the primary bay window surrounds, the tripartite windows. This detailing only occurs on the main level. It was not copied on the second level, the level right above it, even with the first editions. A view over the courtyard of this is the south pavilion that's to be removed. And part of this also illustrates the pergola was there, and then they sort of encased parts of it in the structures. They added onto it. They weren't clever enough to take those outriggers and all that stuff off, and all of that stuff is rotted off once. The pergola's been replaced 3 times that we can tell from photographs. And it is now rotting off, and what began this work was the owner's wish to fix up the house and keep it from leaking. Began the discussion of what to take off. Overview of the courtyard from the roof terrace itself, looking east. This is the east wing of the pergola. Another view of the chapel. So the area that's being removed is in this area right here, and in this area right here. The north pavilion that's remaining is under the existing hip roof, part of which was chopped off and a gable added. We don't know whether the hip is still there or not. We'll find out when we open it up. The design of the carport, a 2-car carport was required as part of the subdivision and never built. And so we are providing the parking in an attached carport. The attachment is just the minimum required to the existing building because of the proximity of the carport to the house. Any other place to put the carport would push it into the setbacks, which we were trying to avoid that review process. This now is an existing paved auto court and serves as the parking area for the house. First floor plan, there's an existing stair that was added probably with the Pittman addition of the chapel over this area. We are removing that and then removing an enclosure of a solarium, it looks like, over the years, was added onto, and it very much blocks a really wonderful view of La Cumbre Peak. The demolition plan, all of the enclosed space on the south side is to be removed. And the area in this cross-hatched area to be removed, and then the stair to be removed. Actually, this isn't correct. These columns, which were added later, are to be removed on the corners. They were added fairly recently. All of the columns will be restored to match existing. And then this is the plan as it will appear when done. We are adding a fireplace on the second floor here. The existing pergola to be removed. I know it does not go through here, but it may go through here, but it's one of those things we don't know how much is buried until we uncover it all. The existing pergola is the third that I know of that was on the house. The original one was round peeler logs. The second one was dimensional lumber, square, nice chunky pieces. And the third one is a lighter one, which is almost totally rotted away over the years. And the proposal is to replicate the second one, which is the square, more dimensional lumber, which is a photograph in the historical report. Staff requested that we extend the pergola over the entire extent of the east side. It was originally proposed just to be in the middle bay. There's a rather awkward connection here that needs to be worked out in detail. And then the reconstruction of the pergola all across the south side as requested by the historians, and then a partial to match on the opposite side, just filling in the ends and overlapping the existing pavilion much as it does now. A section through the courtyard, looking towards the north pavilion. This is the proposed revision of the tower right now. It's a very simple hip roof, and seems somewhat inconsistent with the Mission Revival style. This is showing the pergola as it looks, restored columns where they don't exist, or they need to be removed or rebuilt, and then the pergola that's proposed, very simple, very much like the second pergola that was on the building.
Pardon me, is this the proposed new chimney?
This is,
Fireplace.
there's an existing chimney, like right there, that comes out of the living room. We're adding on to it with the fireplace and adjacent chimney. This is an existing chimney that is there right now. In each instance, there's a photograph of the existing, a rendering of the computer model in perspective, and then the rendering of the computer model as a straight-on elevation. So this is really more like what it's going to look like than that. And I think the west elevation in particular shows the absolute strength of the original design, or the original concept of the architect that was later mucked up by owner's request to, add on this and add on that. And it seems because of the change in detailing that either the architect changed or very reluctantly did it and wanted history to know that he had no part in it other than signing the drawings to keep the owner happy.
Question before you turn the page.
Yeah.
These open arches here?
Yes.
They remain, right?
They remain. There is no change to the stone plinth of the building. The openings were not rendered just for the sake of simplicity, nor is this lovely lantern on the corner going anywhere. I just didn't want to take the month it would take to build that out of a computer model.
And neither are the trees going away, right?
Neither are the trees going away. No. The trees, those were actually, to answer Commissioner Reyes's question, rather. The owner recently went through and pruned everything away from the house. About a year ago, actually, and it recently he just finished. It's a large piece of property with a lot of oak trees, and they were pruned up and trimmed away from the house. What I referred to as the back of the house, the north elevation. South elevation. Again, seeing it in elevation is lying because the north pavilion will disappear when you see it from the south. And again, the absolute strength and purity of the original design restored to the house. Elevations of the carport. The carport is derivative of elements of the house with the addition of taller columns with the same design, pergola matching that on the roof, and then square piers on the corners just to differentiate it from what's happening on the house.
What is that, just a very shallow hip roof?
Yeah, just 2 and 12, just to get a slope on it, sitting on top of a pergola.
Okay.
The north elevation existing is just a mess of things. This is that driveway they were talking about that went off to the property. Here with the carport in front of it, intended to look like a pergola more than a carport, even though it will house the cars, and then a new wall with taller windows where that bay was enclosed.
Okay. We need to wrap it up, Mr. Lavoie.
Views from the courtyard
Okay.
and details for the carport
Okay.
and for the house itself. In the rest, and we don't know how much of the parapet was buried in the existing walls. It will be reconstructed to match existing that's there. The cornice molding is intact just about everywhere in the house. The detailing of the tower is referential to the original detailing, and provided the detailing for the windows, which are on the second floor, which are different, as I mentioned, from those on the first floor.
And this is actually a guardrail, is it not?
Yes, it is.
So, aren't you going to have issue there?
No.
Okay.
Do you have
Residents.
the detail for the windows on the first floor?
No, I don't. In that, we're not doing anything to those windows. I didn't provide it. I can, if you'd like it for reference.
Okay, I'll open public comment. Seeing no public, I'll close public comment. Questions from the commission? Just one quick question, Mr. Lavoie. Why a carport and not a garage?
I didn't want the imposition of a garage in the back of the house. I thought there's some lovely views out the back of the house of the mountains, and it's out of the kitchen and out of a bedroom and out of what will be a breakfast room. And I didn't want a garage sitting out there.
Okay.
I mean, I'd rather look at something that looks like a pergola that happens to have cars in it when the cars are there.
As long as they're nice cars.
They are nice cars.
Commissioner Rios, any questions? Commissioner Murray?
No, I don't.
Sharp?
No.
Boucher? Winnick?
Just one for myself. I'm curious to know what your roofing material is that you're putting on that carport, because at a 2 and 12.
I use a membrane roofing.
So is
Probably a cool roofs type membrane roofing, white, so that when you look down on it,
this sort of disappears.
sort of disappears.
Okay. Yeah, curious. Thanks.
Comments? Okay, Mr. Winnick.
I think it's a really nice project, and I actually, the discourse I think was good that it came up from Commissioner Murray about the issue of what is the character defining historic element in the time period that we should be looking at for the building. I think the architecture does get greatly improved by getting that nice horizontal streamlined look to it, and having the pergola on top and stuff. So I support the design and think it's great. Thank you.
Boucher?
Well, this building is very dear to my heart, okay? And I'm pleased to see that you have a great architect, and I think he's going to be, it's going to turn out very, very well. So thank you.
Sharp?
I only can commend the owner and the architect for proposing a good project.
Murray, anything different?
No, I concur. Having seen the drawings, I really see the project now. Reading the report, I had a hard time. I really had a hard time. So I apologize if there was a sense that,
No, I repeat that.
No.
Commissioner Rios? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
No, I'm not finished. Obviously, Mr. Lavoie, you put a lot of thought into this, and I think it shows in what form we're going to eventually get with this building, and it's going to be more true to what the intended form was. So I think that that is a very good thing. And you had a discussion item, Mr. Lavoie?
If I could request final approval so that the applicant could pull a demolition permit, and then we can submit the final details at a later, in 2 weeks.
Okay,
actually.
I will summarize the comments then. The comments are that the project is commendable and appropriate to the original architecture, and that the details return to consent.
I'll make that motion.
So it's a final approval.
Indefinitely on
No.
the details?
2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks to consent? Okay. Is that okay with the maker?
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion by Boucher, second by Sharp.
And that would be for project design approval and final approval.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this would be appealable by City Council. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Get out of here. Thank you. Good stewardship of the home.
Very.
All right. Next item on the agenda is item number 10. I apologize to the applicants. We are a half hour behind. I apologize to the commissioners as well. 1321 Alameda Padre Serra. This is second concept review. Action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. Project was last reviewed on August 15th, 2012. Do we have those comments?
This item's continued.
What
Chair
did I
Suding.
say?
Chair Suding. Staff had an announcement that item 10 was being postponed. We are now on item 11.
I know.
Oh.
At the beginning of the meeting.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry. Beg your pardon.
There we are.
Item number 11. Good. We are now only 10 minutes behind. This is the project
Are these both the same?
for 1330 Chapala Street.
On the camera there.
This is concept review and public hearing. It's a new project. It's a proposal it's a proposal for a new 3-story multifamily rental unit development on a 91,000 square foot parcel located at the corner of West Sola and Chapala Streets.
Chair Suding. These are the site photos. Staff had some initial comments.
Site photos. There's nothing
Get everybody settled.
Thank you. Debbie
I just want to find out what plans are.
Debbie just put one down. This is yours, and those two are yours.
And this is the
And this is the same. It's just not folded.
Just unfolded so it
Thank you.
projects better on the TV.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Sharp, and good afternoon.
Chair Sharp.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at Sharp. Chair Suding and Historic Landmarks Commissioners. Betty Weiss, City Planner. Just wanted to make a few initial comments on this new project. Of course, the Commission has had a review or two or few of a prior project at the same location, but I wanted to start this one off in terms of its compliance and consistency with the city's general plan, as it is a new approach for the project site. This project is proposed as a rental housing project, and it is proposed at a density that is consistent with the city's recently adopted general plan, which is what we now term medium-high. The medium-high area was carved out of a central part of the city's downtown area in and around the El Pueblo Viejo, and in recognition of numerous historic landmarks in that area. So the density of the proposed residential project is, for the project site, is approximately 17 dwelling units per acre. The project is a rental project where you may have heard about rental project incentives of much greater density, but that does not apply in this location, and the applicant is proposing the project, as I said, consistent with the general plan land use element as well as the historic resources element that recommends for lower densities in and around this core downtown area where we have historic resources. Also, again, the proposed historic resources element is pending approval at City Council, but staff believes that this project is a great opportunity and example for this commission and the applicant and the community to look at a project that's both consistent with the general plan land use as well as the historic resources element, and be an example of an appropriate project for this area. Staff has completed only an initial review of the project. We do anticipate that after your concept review, the applicant will prepare a new historic structures report. Again, I mentioned earlier that this commission has reviewed prior projects on this site, but they will do a new historic structures report to evaluate this project, as well as the surrounding and adjacent important buildings. So that's our initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Question for you. Because this is a for-rent project, will it be not going to Planning Commission?
That's correct. The HLC is the discretionary review body for this project.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Could introduce yourselves for the record and give us a brief presentation.
All right. Detlev Pikert, Principal Pikert Group Architects.
Lisa Plowman, Pikert Group Architects.
David Corwin, President, Metropolitan Theaters.
So we wanted to start just by having David make a few remarks about the family's objectives with the site and sort of the history of their ownership of the property.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's been a few years since we've been in front of you, and just want to review a little background because I know there's some new faces. We're a fourth-generation family company. The Arlington is unquestionably the jewel of our circuit and our company. It was purchased by my grandfather 7 decades ago, and we continue to really want to realize the potential of the site and fulfill the original vision of a village surrounding the theater, which we presented when we were originally here. Certainly a lot's changed in the world and the economy since we were here with our last project. But we've had the luxury of that time to sort of review and fine-tune our concept and determine how we think we can best complement the dynamic Alma del Pueblo development that's going to be right next door, to try and together enhance the neighborhood and help create what we think is really unparalleled energy on Upper State Street, which provides for both complete daytime and nighttime usage. We've come up with a plan that we hope will embrace, that will address, we think, the community needs, and also enable us to hold the development property long-term, which we're excited about. I'd look forward to Lisa and Daddy going through the details with you and to hearing your comments.
I wanted to thank Ms. Weiss for coming down, and she sort of stole my thunder. Those were many of the remarks that I was going to make regarding the consistency with the general plan. But as David Corwin mentioned, they had a lot of time to review the project over that 3-year hiatus and analyze what would probably be best for the site given what had happened in the economy and given their changing objectives. The family decided they wanted to maintain ownership of what's built on this property. So by building a rental project, that accomplishes that goal. The rental project coincidentally accomplishes the goal of the general plan, as Ms. Weiss was saying. I don't know if any of us realize, but it's been probably about 30 to 40 years since a rental project of this size has been built in Santa Barbara. And something interesting to note is we just did a demographic study as part of Coastal Housing Coalition, and 90% of the residents in this area zip code are renters. So 90% of the people in 93101 rent. And so this will be another opportunity for people in the community to have a new apartment to be able to live in. So I think we're all really excited about coming up with a project that we think meets the objectives of the general plan. And I think with that, Deddy's going to give a little bit of background about the previous project so that the new HLC members have an idea of what was before and now what you have before you, which is a remarkably different project.
Thanks, Lisa. I have to say, just before I get into it, how we're very fortunate to be working with the Corwin family, just because they have owned this property for so many years, and they obviously really care about it, and they care about its future and the potential. It's just great to be working with a client of that nature. So what I've got here is, and we're handing it around to the others here, it's just a small-scale set of the original or the previous proposal that you saw several years ago now, and it was a condominium development. And here, the first sheet, you can just kind of see the general context, the Arlington Theater in the middle. Over here, the formerly Vons store now being redeveloped. And then on this side, you see our project kind of wrapping around to the edge of the Arlington Theater there on the rear. And that project consisted of 35 residential condominiums and 10,000 square feet of commercial when you saw it at that time. That was a total of about 60,000 square feet of habitable space. And then underneath it, we had proposed a parking structure that was about 43,000 square feet. This next sheet will just show you what a little bit of a closer view. One of the things that we really tried very hard to do in that proposal was to maintain a kind of a system of public paseos, ways for the general public to walk through the site and enjoy the experience of the Arlington Theater as they walk around it and walk through the paseo that leads out by the front entrance to the actual theater itself, with a big open space where the kind of courtyard is and the exits for the Arlington Theater and the kind of green lawn area. So that was one of the things that we wanted to maintain, and we continue to take the same approach with the proposal that I'm going to present to you in a moment. The next couple of sheets just show what the elevations looked like at that time. What we had there was a 3-story building over the parking structure. It was about 41 feet high from the Sola Street sidewalk, with some variations obviously in height there, and then the Arlington Theater behind it. And then this was the end elevation, as seen from Chapala Street. So that just gives you a little bit of background. This is a section cut through. Again, you can see the parking structure that we had proposed there, and the residential and commercial condominiums up above it. So now as has already been stated, we've kind of taken a different approach entirely. After some time, as David Corwin mentioned, re-examining the whole concept, we've come up with the idea of a project that the Corwin family can own in the long term with the Arlington Theater, that does create some residential development adjacent to the Arlington Theater, still maintaining the same kind of paseo and open space and courtyard adjacent to the Arlington Theater. Again, here where the exits are, areas that we're going to enhance, obviously, and landscape as part of this proposal. And what you're looking at here, one of the is the building that is being proposed. And one of the fundamental things about this plan that I want to explain is that there's parking now over the entire site, as you're well aware. The Arlington Theater is actually obligated to provide a certain number of parking spaces under the city's ordinances, and the number is 60 parking spaces. There's just over 120 there right now. So rather than building an underground parking garage under the entire site, which was really something that we found to be, for the previous project and certainly for this project, infeasible, we're maintaining the parking lot at the back, obviously restriping it and adding landscaping and trees and a lot of features that aren't really there now, and reorganizing it, and then focusing the development over on the easterly portion here of that parking lot, with a parking structure for the residential units, which will have about 36 spaces in it, and then there'll be 4 spaces for Arlington staff that will also be included in this, and then there'll be 54 spaces altogether with the zone to benefit, exactly. So at the grade level along the paseo and at the sort of edge of the parking garage, we've got some residential and commercial residential flex space units, recognizing that this area, because it'll have public pedestrian traffic, might be a good location to allow some commercial uses there, and that's what we're indicating here. There'll be an entrance here with an elevator, an entrance into the parking, very simple parking garage over here. And one other thing that I think differentiates this quite a bit from what we had previously proposed is that we've got a 13-foot setback for landscaping from the sidewalk at the Sola Street elevation, and then we've got a 10-foot setback with a little bit of an indent there on the pedestrian paseo alley, which will also kind of just soften the experience of the building on that side as well. So as you're aware, if you've been over there at any time, that the existing parking lot is actually depressed below the sidewalk by about 5 feet. It varies, from one point of the site to another, but generally in this area it's about 5 feet below, 5 or 5.5 feet below. And so that gives the ability to put the parking garage on grade, maybe just slightly depressed there, and then the ability to face that edge of the parking garage that's facing the Arlington with the residential units there. And then on the upper levels, you'll see that we have arranged a series of residential units surrounding some courtyards, some looking outwards, with a variety of unit types, including some studio units, one-bedroom units, two-bedroom, and several three-bedroom units as well. I think it's important to note that overall we have 36 units. However, the overall square footage of habitable space is around 32,000 square feet, as opposed to the 60,000 square feet in the previous proposal. And the reason that we still have 36 units is because the units are apartments. They're modest in size. They average about 800 square feet under the, if you're looking at them from the perspective of the average unit density.
And
formulas.
that's consistent with the new average unit density program that was adopted as part of the, or will be adopted via the general plan.
So we
implementation.
have studio apartments that are about 440 square feet, on through two-bedroom apartments, 800, 860, 900 square feet, and I think the three bedrooms are I believe it's 1,200.
The average unit size in the former project was about 1,571. Yeah.
So
much
I mean, it's
smaller.
obvious that we've scaled the project back dramatically, and what we're proposing then is on the second floor, the units are arranged around these courtyards, et cetera, and then on the level, second level above the parking garage, we have some additional, another layer of units. However, we've kind of cut back the corners here at either end of the building, with just a couple of units in the middle, and then some amenity space, outdoor amenity spaces, an exercise amenity space, and a couple of private patios for the larger three-bedroom units that are located at that level. So that gives you kind of an overview of the plan. And then when we flip to the elevation...
I'm going to respectfully ask you to wrap up in 5 minutes or less.
I will do that. So here you see the Sola Street elevation, and you're not seeing the whole elevation all the way over to Chapala Street, because that's where the parking lot is over here. However, what we've tried to do here is kind of break the building down into these three smaller masses that are facing the street. The parking garage comes out of the ground about 6 feet. And so we have a couple of sort of grand stairs that lead up to the courtyards on the podium level there. And then we have the two-story elevations on top of that parking structure. And again, the character of the buildings in this kind of initial conceptual phase is meant to, echo the sort of the character of the inside of the Arlington Theater, the sort of Spanish-style village environment with some cantilevered balconies, wrought iron balconies, et cetera, arches and awnings, or I guess we have some.
I think that had
et
been direction from the HLC in 2009 when we originally came. And the height from the street, Debbie, is 33 feet?
33 feet, as opposed to what was previously proposed, about 41 feet. So this firstly shows you kind of a rendered view of what that Paseo looks like with the open space, and just kind of gives you a sense of the character. And these are the units that are at the ground level at the Paseo there, and that will be a mix of some residential and some commercial, possible live-work type of units with the second story above, and then in a couple of instances there's a third story. And then here you see a section cut through that shows the relationship to the Arlington Theater, the relationship to the open space, the Paseo here, the ground level units with their little inset private areas. You can see the courtyard in the middle with the units in the background, and the parking garage there. And then this is, of course, the street at Sola Street, and you can see how the relationship of that to the street. And that pretty much concludes.
Got no more pages.
Wow, no more pages.
I have a fundamental question, and that would be, Where are the property lines on this parcel?
Go back to the.
Go ahead.
Actually, I'm not sure. We may not have anything that shows the.
Okay.
Yeah, but
It includes the
essentially
theater.
It includes this alleyway and the alley that goes up to the.
That's a separate parcel, actually.
Okay, that's a separate parcel. The Arlington is another parcel?
No, it's
this is all one
all
parcel. And I should have mentioned that initially. The size of the parcel that the Arlington Theater is on, including the parking lot, is 91,000 square feet.
Okay, so if I am hearing you correctly, this whole thing
Yes.
is one parcel.
Well, not this piece.
Okay.
Yeah, that's separate.
And this is also, I believe,
Okay.
isn't it a separate parcel as well, the alleyway?
But this is not separate from this?
No,
Okay.
it's
Thank
all
you.
one parcel.
All right, I will open public comment, and the first and only one is Susan Chamberlain. Mr. Corwin, if you could relinquish your seat for public comment, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Susan Chamberlain. I'm a landscape historian. I have an MA in architectural history and a landscape architect's license. David Gebhard identified 3 buildings as most significant in Santa Barbara: the courthouse, the Mission, and the Arlington Theater. 35 feet was the description of the height. That's basically 3 stories. No matter how you stack it, one of the elevations showed that you're going to take up more than half of the mass of the theater, blocked by buildings. The original village concept called for 1 story around the Arlington Theater, so this really doesn't fit the original village concept, and it's blocking views not just from the street of the building, but also from the surrounding hillsides, the Mesa, the Riviera. And I just want to strongly urge you to tone down this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chamberlain. I will close public comment, having no other speaker slips present.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Gantz?
We did have an emailed letter from Mr. Randall Fox, and I believe...
I did receive it. I didn't print it out.
Okay. So I don't know if it was answered. I don't believe it was. And I think it probably should be answered as how is the parking being divvied up?
I'm happy to answer that. He had some questions.
And when you're ready, I mean, whenever the chair and the commission wants to hear that, but I would like that answered for the public and for Mr.
Okay.
Fox.
Thank you.
Chair seating is now.
Let us get through questions, and maybe it will become one of our commissioners' questions.
Sounds good.
Another fundamental question. Was there ever any study at putting the structures on this leg of the parcel?
Yes. Mr. Chair, we obviously studied a lot of different scenarios, and having had structure, in that portion of the site, it's possible that could work, but there's a lot of activity back there. There's the vehicles, big trucks that deliver, all the theatrical equipment when they have larger productions there, and you can see that we've allocated some parking, for those vehicles. And then the other thing is we felt that it would really be much more inviting to create space here around the Arlington, the paseos, and kind of define the common space rather than just having a parking lot here. Define the existing alleyway with a kind of character that sort of echoes what's already there, to make it an attractive space to walk. And that's really our was our thinking. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions from the rest of the commissioners? Commissioner Arias, any questions? How about Commissioner Lavoie? Oh, sorry. I hate when that happens. Commissioner Murray?
Daddy, could you just review, so the height will be varying from 33 to 35?
yes. So what that means is that from the sidewalk here, the highest point at the top of a roof, of a pitched roof, would be 33 feet. And then on the side of the paseo, because of the way it drops down there, the height would be 35 feet there.
Commissioner Sharp, any questions?
I was talking to the chair when you gave that. Off the back of the sidewalk, What is the height of the project? Solar Street sidewalk.
From the Solar Street sidewalk, 33 feet.
Number two, is there any reason the garage couldn't be lowered? You said it's 6 feet from the podium above this sidewalk.
Exactly. It does come out 6 feet.
Can the garage
Yeah.
structure be lowered?
Well, let's go back to the site plan. I'll try to answer that. But yeah, that's what's going on there. And one of the things that we intended to do or intending to do is drop the garage somewhat into the ground, but it's kind of a balancing act between being able to get access into it from the parking lot without an extended ramp, and then secondly, to create the interface. We have a taller structure in the parking garage than we need here. So at this end of the site, we've got the parking garage depressed as much as we can and still maintain this layer of development of residential habitable space against the edge of that parking lot and maintain an even level at the top above it. Otherwise, we'd end up with steps and ramps and everything else inside there, and this would end up being a little bit higher.
What's your floor-to-floor for those units?
We're going with, right now, I don't know what the floor structure is going to be. I'm guessing it's going to be around a foot for this type of construction. We're going with 9-foot plate heights. That's
you.
pretty much kind of standard of the industry for apartments these days.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Commissioner Boucher, any questions? Commissioner Winnick.
Handed a plant, well, actually two. I'll ask the plant list, and then I'd be happy to ask the question that Ms. Gantz asked.